The Supernatural Companions, Hidden Legends Short Story Collection, Book 1. Written by Megan Linski and Alicia Radis. Narrated by Hannah Sharafian, Zachary Boersma, Amy Hall, A.J. Carter, Renee Kim, Caleb Summers, Maria Posey, and Jonathan M. Matthews. Introduction. Welcome to the Hidden Legends universe. Within this short story collection are 5 different magical short stories that take place in the Hidden Legends world. The Hidden Legends universe is a full-length fantasy paranormal series co-written by Megan Linski and Alicia Radis. You don't need to read any of the Hidden Legends novels to enjoy these stories. Readers who are brand new to the saga can read these shorts without any previous introduction to the world itself. Readers who have already enjoyed other Hidden Legends novels will find their reading experience enhanced by partaking in these never-before-seen shorts, which contain bonus material that are relevant to the published novels. If you find you like these stories, you can experience more with the characters within this collection by reading the full-length series they are connected to. We hope you enjoy your adventure. The Hidden Forest, Academy of Magical Creatures short story. Written by Megan Linski and Alicia Radis. Narrated by Hannah Sharafian and Zachary Boersma. Chapter 1. Imogen. Call me crazy, but I just don't trust anyone who isn't willing to wear a bow tie in public. Sassy, are you even listening? Sassy went completely still at my side. We were deep in the forest, where the only sound came from the wind rustling through the trees above our heads. It was early on a beautiful Sunday morning, albeit a bit cloudy morning. It was the perfect time of year to go hunting for Berlangers. I'd never actually seen one before, but in a world of dragons and unicorns, I had to believe they existed. I had the perfect hunting partner, so I was really hoping today was the day. We'd see who's crazy when I shove one of those little critters in Liam's nose. He was the biggest critic on my tournament team, and at least if he wasn't going to wear a bow tie, I'd get him to believe in a Berlanger. I bent to Sassy's side and stroked her red fur, running my hand down from the top of her head to the base of her tail, where I'd tied a big purple bow to match the ones in my pigtails. We were so freaking adorable it broke my little heart. Our cuteness just couldn't be contained. You smell something, girl? We hadn't even set our bait out yet. Berlangers loved sweets, so I'd gone into Campago this morning to pick up a bottle of honey, pound of chocolate, and a triple berry smoothie. The smoothie was for me. Hey, Berlangers can't have all the fun, can they? Sassy stared out into the trees intensely, like something had caught her attention. I followed her gaze but saw nothing except underbrush. But by the look in her eyes, I knew my familiar saw something I couldn't. Foxes were particularly good at hunting small creatures like Berlangers, but Sassy was so gentle that if we found one, when we found one, she'd just toss the little fur balls in the air and bat at them. We weren't at risk of harming the poor little endangered critters. Sassy? I whispered again. She looked just like the fox statue in the 3rd-floor hall on the way to the Navita dorms. I'd never seen her stand so still. It was a little unnerving. She definitely saw something. My heart began to pound in excitement. Even if we didn't find anything today, the adventure was worth it. A flash of blue darted across the forest 30 yards or so ahead of us. I jumped to my feet in excitement, nearly losing the wicker basket I was carrying. Go get it, girl! At my command, Sassy took off running. I sprinted behind her, my pink galoshes splashing through a mud puddle. She darted with such agility through the forest that she was a mere blur. I could hardly keep up. Holding my hand out in front of me, I used my magic to part the underbrush in front of Sassy. The plants curled out of the way, creating a path so she could move faster. In the distance, I spotted a long gray structure cutting through the forest. At first, I thought it was a short cliff or some sort of natural rock formation, but as we got closer, I saw that the structure was man-made. I just barely caught a glimpse of blue the size of my fist flying up over the wall. Then it was gone. Sassy yipped and jumped, clawing at the stone wall, but she didn't even reach halfway up it. I slowed when I caught up to her. The wall was at least 10 feet tall, reaching so high above my head there was no way I'd reach the top, even if I was normal height. It stretched far out into the forest in both directions. It was made completely of stone that was packed so tightly together that I couldn't see through any cracks to the other side. My guess was Navita built the wall. It definitely had the traits of fine Navita craftsmanship, if I do say so myself. I'd never been this far into the forest. In fact, I was pretty sure I was trespassing, but I figured if I got caught, I'd just claim ignorance. The only threat anyone saw when they looked at me, Imogen Arnold, was that some of my awesome might rub off on them. Most people called it weirdness, but I didn't bother with the labels. Awesome sounded better. "We saw one!" I cried, bending to scoop Sassy up in my arms. I spun her around, holding her high above my head. We spun so fast that her eyes rolled back in her head and she stumbled when I set her down. "Can you believe we actually saw one? I'm bummed no one was here to see it." I was rambling now. I often did that when Sassy and I were alone. "Am I the only one who wants to get a better look?" I asked my familiar rhetorically. "What do you say we scale the wall?" "I won't tell if you won't." Sassy wore a completely innocent expression. I took that as a sign of agreement. "Up you go, girl," I said as I aimed my palms toward the ground. At my command, roots should have twisted out of the ground and lifted her up over the wall. But all that happened was the dirt shook a little beneath her. Huh. I gazed at my hands, puzzled. It just worked a second ago. I tried again, this time aiming my magic at the tree branches above our heads. I intended for them to curl down so Sassy could climb them and jump over, but those too remained in place. What the heck? I turned to the wall and pressed an ear to it, inspecting the cold stone for magical frequencies. I couldn't feel anything, but hey, it was worth a shot. This place must have a ward around it, I theorized, to keep people from getting in. I didn't realize there were still places like this. 100 years ago, sure. Now? I stepped away from the wall and pressed my finger to my chin. Stumped. "I guess we're going to have to go back," I sighed. Sassy scrunched up her face at me. "Ha!" I pointed to her, laughing. "I totally got you. A secret wall deep in the forest with a ward around it? This is a job for the Glitter Gang. I just came up with that now. Do you like it? It could be our mystery investigation team name. Or maybe we could try Unicorn Force." "No, that's dumb. I like Glitter Gang." Sassy stared back blankly. "So we're in agreement then? Good, come on." I gestured to Sassy and started walking down the length of the wall. Maybe we'd find a hole in the wall or a fallen log I could move to give us a boost. Or maybe there'd be a tree close enough to climb. You know, we could start an investigative detective service, I rambled. We could find lost familiars and stuff like that. Wait, no, we'd never find any clients. I mean, who goes around losing their familiars? Scratch that. The Glitter Gang could be a team of explorers. We'll set out to find endangered species, or prove the existence of extinct creatures. I have no idea where we'll get funding, but we could get lucky. Maybe we'll win the tournament and I'll fund the expedition. Ha, look at me. I'm talking crazy. Up ahead, I saw the stone wall end. I increased my pace eagerly. Look at that, Sassy. Maybe we can get inside. My heart sank when we reached the break in the wall and I saw that we'd only met a corner. The wall turned sharply and stretched further into the forest than I could see. I sighed. I wonder how far this thing goes. We have to get in there. I know I saw that Berlanger. What if this is where they live? What if it's where all the lost species live? I drew in a sharp breath and screeched. Sassy jumped. This could be it. It's safe and secluded. The lost species could have been hiding here all this time. Oh, don't give me that look. I know it's wrong to bother them, but I just want to see them. If we do find something, I swear I won't tell a soul about it. Deal? This stays with the Glitter Squad. Sassy nodded and I patted her on the head. Good girl. Let's go. We walked along the perimeter of the wall for what felt like another half hour, but we couldn't find a way to cross. I placed my hands on my hips and glanced around the forest, trying to catch my breath after the long hike. I hated to admit it, but I was totally turned around. Well, this is unfortunate, I said. I think we only have one other choice. Sassy looked up at me in question. We need to go get help. It wasn't my proudest moment, to be honest, but what other choice did I have? Sassy and I started back the way we came until I finally found my bearings and we headed in the general direction of Campago. After a long hike, we finally found the road that led into town. My eyes roamed over the bustling city. Despite the cloud cover, there was so much color to Campago. Pops of red and green caught my eye as we passed through the Italian district, where ivy grew up the side of the brick buildings and flowers hung over the doorways along the cobblestone street. Familiars scurried this way and that. Look, Sassy, there goes a Cerastes. A spineless serpent with the horns of a ram slithered by. You know, we first learned of Cerastes from Greek lore. They're said to hide in the sand with only their horns protruding to trick their prey into thinking they're food. Oh, and look! I pointed skyward as a pterodactyl-like creature soared above us. A Kongmato! Central African lore. Sassy trotted along beside me, looking pleased. Nobody else appreciated my tidbits of knowledge of magical creatures quite like she did. We turned a street corner and entered the more modern shopping district of Campago, close to the square. Good morning, Jack. I waved to the old man who owned the barber shop on this side of town while he was opening up shop. A lovely day, he called back. How's it going, Emmy? I asked the girl who worked at the craft store I frequented. Hey, Imogen. She waved back on her way to work. Will we be seeing you today? Can't, I replied. Maybe next weekend. I need some purple tulle for my dorm room. You know our hours, Emmy said, hurrying on her way down the sidewalk. We'll see you soon. I eyed other people as I passed, wondering who I could ask for help. I knew most everyone, but I didn't know who I could trust with this information. Maybe I'd head back up to the castle and see if I could find Sophia. It'd be a long walk back to the stone wall, but it was worth it. Just then, I spotted Jonah emerging from the gym, with Squeaks close behind. Squeaks wore a sweatband on her head, and Jonah wore a flannel jacket over a muscle tee. Just what I needed. Someone with muscle. Jonah! I called, racing up to him. He looked up at the sound of his name. It took a moment for his eyes to fall upon me. You know, 'cause I was so short. Hey, Imogen. What's up? I stopped in front of him. My head hurt when I craned it upward to look at him. He was so tall. I need your help. With? I shot a glance around the square, where people milled about. I grabbed his elbow and led him down the sidewalk a bit, where it was more secluded. I lowered my voice. I found something in the woods, but I can't get to it by myself. Jonah narrowed his eyes. What kind of thing? It's just a thing, all right? Are you in or not? Jonah crossed his arms. Not until I know what I'm getting myself into. I sighed. I found a hidden forest. Jonah relaxed, looking intrigued. A hidden forest, you say? How hidden are we talking? I've already told you too much. Can I trust you? He smiled proudly. Darling, I can keep a secret like nobody's business. I pressed my lips together, unsure. Jonah struck me as the kind of guy who was into gossip. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized he just liked to hear good gossip. He wasn't the kind of guy who would spread it around, especially not when it involved a friend. Okay, I'll tell you, but you can't tell anyone. Got it? Jonah nodded. It's surrounded by a big rock wall. I can't reach the top. Why can't you just use your powers? Oh, wow. That would work. I didn't think of that, I said sarcastically before returning to my normal voice. It has some type of ward around it. Our elements don't work there. So, will you help me get over the top? Jonah's eyes lit up. I could tell I'd piqued his interest, but his expression quickly softened. What's in it for me? Adventure, I answered. Plus, what's the point of working out those guns if you never use them practically? Jonah looked down to his biceps and flexed. Guns, huh? Yeah. I mean, you're so strong. I reached out and squeezed his rock-hard biceps. You could get over that wall no problem. Jonah beamed. I knew I had him. I'm in. So, where's this hidden forest? Follow me. I listened to Jonah yabber on and on about weightlifting and protein shakes all the way back to the wall. Normally, I was the one who couldn't stop talking. It was strange, finding someone who loved talking as much as I did. There it is, I pointed when I spotted the wall in the distance. Holy crap, Jonah cried. You weren't kidding. It's pretty huge. I shot him a death glare. Would I lie to you? I don't know, Arnold, Jonah said. Maybe you're planning to leave me out here and replace me with another Yapluma for the cup. Please, I scoffed. Our team is the best. We need you. Jonah puffed up his chest at that. Should I send Squeaks to check it out? Really? I eyed him skeptically. Squeaks was clumsier than a womgrombit in a snowstorm. The tree cover is pretty thick here. Jonah looked upward and dropped his shoulders, apparently deciding that his half-horse, half-eagle familiar wouldn't fit through the canopy. Just give me a boost and I'll be able to see over, I said. We stopped a few feet from the rock wall, and Jonah squatted down, interlacing his fingers. I bent to scoop up Sassy and placed her in my basket, then stuck the handle in the crook of my elbow. Up you go, princess, Jonah said. I stepped into his hand and gave a hop while he lifted at the same time. My fingers caught the top of the wall, and I pulled myself up so I could just barely peek over. Jonah held me up like a cheerleader. Oh, my word, I breathed. The sun broke out of the clouds just then, shining rays through the top of the canopy and down onto the colorful underbrush. I knew people never meant it when they said the grass was greener on the other side, but in this case, it was true. Various shades of green popped across the landscape like an expertly crafted painting. Ivy crawled up the trunks of trees, and water droplets left over from the morning dew glistened off low-lying leaves and a spiderweb on a tree branch near my head. Vibrant shades of red, blue, and purple blossoms enhanced the landscape. I spotted all kinds of colorful flowers, moss, and mushrooms. What do you see? Jonah asked. It's beautiful, I whispered. It was truly the fantasy forest I'd been dreaming about my whole life.
What? Jonah pressed. What is it?
I looked down at him. It's just a forest, but it's amazing. You should see it.
Well, are you going to climb over then? You're getting a little heavy.
I smacked him in the head with my free foot, which earned me a glare. Way to make a girl feel great about her figure. Jonah rolled his eyes.
Don't ask me about girlish figures. You know I'm not into that.
Just boost me higher.
On 3,
he said, bouncing a little to work up the momentum.
1, 2, 3.
At the same time Jonah pushed up, I used my arms to heave me over the wall. It was too much, and I went flying over the other side, screaming. My basket flew out of my hands, and Sassy jumped out midair. We landed side by side in a soft bed of moss.
Imogen!
Jonah cried from the other side of the wall.
Are you okay?
I sat up and dusted the dirt off my elbows. Yeah, I'm fine. Are you coming?
On my way.
I heard the sound of him jumping, the slap of his hands as they connected with the top of the wall, and then a huge shadow falling right toward my face. Ah! I screamed, rolling out of the way just in time. Jonah landed with a soft thud right where I'd been sitting. A second later, the sound of Squeak's wings flapping met my ears, and then she too stumbled her way over the wall. Jonah let out a whoosh of air as the huge familiar landed beside him and smacked one of her wings against his face. I stifled a laugh as Squeaks got to her feet and glanced around, looking for Jonah.
Beneath you,
he said in a strained voice. Squeaks looked down, suddenly realizing her hoof was pressed right into Jonah's chest. Jonah inhaled a huge gulp of air, but without his air magic to help him breathe deeper, it took him several moments to catch his breath.
You think that's funny, huh?
He asked as he got to his feet. I shook my head and began to collect my basket and the treats that had flown out of it. I didn't say anything. Jonah dusted off his clothes.
You didn't have to.
Finally, he lifted his gaze and his jaw dropped.
Wow, this place is amazing. What do you think the wall's for?
To keep people out. Duh.
Yeah, but why?
I bit my lower lip. I'm not sure about that yet. Maybe it's a sanctuary.
For what?
Berlangers. Jonah shot me that expression everyone gave me when I mentioned a creature they hadn't heard of. Like I was crazy.
Okay, I'll bite, he said. What's a Berlanger?
My chest lifted. Finally, someone asked instead of just brushing me off. Oh, happy day! They're small, fluffy, and all different colors, I raved. Oh, and they have these cute little feet and waddle when they walk. But they can float, too, so don't underestimate them. They're fast little critters. Jonah nodded.
Uh-huh.
Don't look at me like that, mister. I wagged a finger at him. I saw one just this morning.
Okay, he said in an
I'll believe it when I see it manner.
Which way did this burglar go?
It's not going to rob your house, Jonah. Berlanger.
Berlanger, he repeated. Got it. Where do we find the fluffy little beasts?
This way. I cocked my head and we started into the forest. The hidden forest buzzed with the sound of critters I couldn't see. Bird-like creatures chirped above our heads, and the sound of cricket-like insects met my ears. But no matter how closely I looked into the trees, I didn't see anything. It was like the critters were hiding from us. We must have walked at least 100 yards before Sassy froze beside me. Shh! I held up a finger toward Jonah and Squeaks. Jonah stopped and lowered his voice.
What is it?
Sassy senses a Berlanger, I whispered. Keep an eye out. My eyes scanned the forest, looking for any sign of movement. Suddenly, out of the corner of my eye, a flash of pink shot across my vision. Sassy yipped and took off running. "This way!" I sprinted behind her, gesturing for Jonah and Squeaks to follow. Sassy ran so far ahead that it was hard to keep up without losing her, but the bow I'd tied to the end of her tail helped make her easy to spot. Without ceremony, Sassy came to a halt. As Jonah, Squeaks, and I approached her, I saw that she'd stopped in front of the entrance to a cave. The cave mouth was wide and tall enough for even Squeaks to fit through with ease. It was set deep into a dip in the ground, so that it was almost impossible to see until we were right on top of it. Sassy looked up at me desperately, like she wanted to go inside.
You think the Berlanger went down there?
Jonah asked, eyeing the cave with wide eyes. Looks like it. I stepped forward and steadied myself to slide down the slope leading to the cave. I peeked inside, but could only see the first few feet before it turned pitch black. We should check it out.
No,
Jonah protested in a clipped tone.
Caves were never part of the deal.
Then I'll go myself, I said proudly.
But you don't know what's down there,
Jonah cried. I shrugged and stepped inside the cool tunnel.
Imogen!
Jonah rushed forward and nearly tripped down the slope. Squeaks followed, and she did trip, landing with her legs spread out to the sides at the bottom. Jonah stopped just outside the entrance, looking frightened.
You can't go in there alone.
I'm not. Sassy's with me. He sighed.
You know what I mean.
Squeaks stood and fluffed her feathers. Then come with me, I encouraged.
No way, Jonah insisted. I'm not coming any closer, but at least...
I placed a hand on my hip. At least what? Jonah hung his head.
At least take my light.
He reached into his pocket and pulled out a cell phone, then turned on the flashlight. I inhaled a deep breath. Jonah Channy, you know you're not supposed to have a phone until after graduation. You know what the outside world would do if they found out about us. Jonah bit his lip.
Don't tell anyone, okay?
I smiled as I took the phone from his hand. It'll be our little secret. Jonah returned my smile.
Deal.
I aimed the flashlight back into the cave. The tunnel dipped down, stretching far back into the earth. I wished my Navita magic was working so I could tell how far it went. Here goes nothing, I muttered, stepping into the cave. Sassy and I walked until the entrance became a mere pinprick of light. I aimed the flashlight at the ground and drew a sharp breath when it crossed a footstep in the path. Weird, I whispered as I bent to inspect it. The footprint wasn't much bigger than mine, so I guessed it to be a woman's size 9. Sassy sniffed it. I took note of how the footprint was leading out of the cave rather than into it.
What is it?
Jonah called. His voice echoed off the walls of the cave. It looks like someone's been down here recently, I yelled back.
No way, Jonah insisted. You think someone else knows of this place?
They must. I lifted my gaze and shone the light further into the cave. My eyes fell upon all sorts of evidence suggesting we weren't the only ones who knew about the hidden forest. I spotted a thin, worn piece of rope, perhaps from a shoelace, an old granola wrapper, and various carvings on the rock walls. I stood to make my way over to the carvings, but before I could reach them, the sound of a low growl stopped me dead in my tracks. A warning. Adrenaline shot through my chest, and my hands shook. Slowly, I turned toward the source of the noise, and my heart nearly leapt out of my throat. A pair of large, glowing eyes caught the light. Each one was bigger than my fist, and they were right in front of me, so close that I could feel the creature's breath rush across my skin. Normally, I would welcome a strange, unknown critter, but in this case, I was in a dark cave. I couldn't use my magic, and all I could see through the dim lighting were those eyes. An earth-shattering scream escaped my lungs. I scooped up Sassy and sprinted as fast as I could back toward Jonah.
What?
Jonah started, his voice filled with worry. But I didn't let him finish. In my fright-induced state, I managed to get one single word out. Run!
Chapter 2. Jonah. Caves are disgusting. They're like really crampy and wet and small and just gross. I hate caves. But I wasn't gonna let little Imogen face whatever the hell was roaring down there alone. She was so tiny and cute, and she had a really good sense of fashion. Something hardly anyone at Orenda had. She was a goddamn unicorn, I tell you. I couldn't let something so bright and full of sparkle be eaten alive by what was most likely a really disgusting monster. Hold on, Imogen, I called. I looked at Squeaks and made a face. This bitch owes me for saving her life. Squeaks let out an agreeable caw. I wrinkled my nose as I started sliding downward into the cave. Ew, 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 I said. There was muck and slime everywhere. It was getting all over my gym clothes, which pissed me off because, I'd just bought these. The sides of the walls kept closing in tighter and tighter as I went downward. It didn't help that the roars of the monster made them shake and little rocks came tumbling down. I was a big dude, in more ways than one, guys. Take note. Somebody like Imogen would be perfectly fine crawling in and out of here because she was basically mouse-sized, but I was getting seriously claustrophobic. I tried feeling for air around me, and there was, not that much. I would not be able to blast myself out of here if whatever had most likely already eaten Imogen decided they wanted more than a snack. 3 things made my mind go blank. 1, dick. Every fucking time. 2, good sales. And 3, being a goddamn man. Imogen needed a man right now to save her from the horrendous horrible that was down below. I kept myself going by reminding myself Orenda Academy would really suck balls without Imogen. And we'd be down a tournament partner, which meant I'd be stuck with Senior Grumpy Ass and Miss Altruistic, who still couldn't admit that they were into each other even though it was so obvious. One of these days I was going to buy them a strap-on to get the ball going, although, scratch that. Sophia was a virgin. Maybe I should start slow with condoms? There's another scream from Imogen. Right, gotta keep my mind focused on the task. I'm coming, I shouted, then realized I hadn't even made it 3 feet down. I was still clinging to the cave wall like it was my life. Squeaks took care of that by tripping. She pushed me out of the way, and I went sprawling down the hole onto my face. First thing I saw were Imogen's galoshes. Right, the adorable pink ones. Then a gigantic set of reptilian paws. I slowly got to my feet and looked up. For the love of Britney Spears, Imogen and I were standing face to face with the 2-headed creature and 4 legs and a sharp blue scales all over its body. It looked like a cross between a dog and a dragon, and it was so tall that its 2 heads hit the cave ceiling. Nasty drool dripping from its giant fangs splattered on the floor. Like I suspected, totally gross. It's an orthis, Imogen said, almost in awe. I've never seen them in real life. Yeah, not gonna try to fight that, I yelled. I grabbed Imogen and threw her over my shoulder and ran for the exit like someone was giving away free pumps at the end. Those cute ones with the straps. Or whatever thing he roared and tried to follow. I could hear its big feet stampeding behind us as we ran towards the exit. Sassy followed us. She jumped up on the rocks to the top of the cave like it was nothing, landing on Squeaks' head so that she could give her a boost up. I literally threw Imogen upwards through the hole, and she went flying. I had a problem getting down into the cave, but getting out of it wasn't a problem. I shimmied up that thing faster than you could say work, bitch. I could hear the monster roaring below us when we got above ground. Couldn't fit out the hole. I swept my gorgeous hair out of my eyes and was reminded that I needed to condition tonight. Great, can we go? I asked Imogen as I tried to catch my breath. I've had enough heart attacks for one day. But we haven't found the Berglanders, she protested. I know they're here. Please, Jonah? I sighed. Okie dokie, but just for you, sweetness. If there's any more caves, I'm getting the fuck out of here. No more caves, she promised. Let's just explore the woods. You're lucky I'm already sweaty, I told her. Sassy led the way through a collection of trees that were close together. Her nose was pressed to the ground, which must mean she'd smelled something. I kind of hoped it was a pizza parlor. I could eat one all by myself, though it'd totally ruin my diet. Screw it. I survived a cave. I deserved a cheat day. Thanks for coming to see me back there, Imogen started. I know I can't have been easy to carry. Babe, I can lift 200-pound weights like they're nothing. You don't weigh a thing, I told her. She made a scoffing noise. Thanks for pretending I'm not fat. Girl, if I ever hear you saying that you're fat again, I'm seriously taking you out for the biggest ice cream sundae you've ever seen in your life, and I will sit there as you eat it all. No, Squeaks, not for you. I told her as Squeak's eyes lit up at the mention of ice cream. Okay, I know I'm not huge, but I'm still not as skinny as the other girls, she sighed. Cade and I went on a date last night, and it was so much fun, but I'm still surprised he even notices me. There are so many other girls in my house that are prettier. Oh, yeah. I knew Cade. He was one spicy tamale. Too bad he wasn't gay. Maybe Imogen could share. Hon, you need to own your thickness. Cade is totally into you. That boy's buying what you're selling. You're fucking gorgeous, I said. You think so? She looked up hopefully. The girl needed a serious self-confidence boost. One of these days I was going to give her a total makeover. Cade wouldn't be able to resist eating her up and eating her out. I know so. I grabbed her by the shoulders and leaned down so I could whisper to her. And I wasn't easy because Imogen only came up to my hips. You are the baddest bitch to ever come out of Navita. Own it. Imogen brought her head up. Yeah, I am the baddest bitch in my house. There you go, I said. I was a miracle worker. I should totally become a therapist. There were little peeping noises ahead of us, but the trees weren't close together here, and really hard to get through. Squeaks had gone ahead of us and was attempting to squeeze through two trunks, but had gotten stuck. She screamed for me to help. Hold on, you hoe, I told her. I pushed my shoulder up against Squeak's ass and pushed with all my might. She barely moved an inch. Her hooves flailed in the dirt as she tried to squeeze through. I told you need to stop eating so many carbs. You've been sneaking treats again, haven't you? Squeaks chortled, and my mouth dropped open. You have! That's it, we're quitting chocolate. Squeaks let out a few high-pitched twitters. She kicked her back leg out at me. Don't take that tone with me, missy. I pushed her one more time, and Squeaks popped through the trees. I fell in after her, and Imogen stepped over me into the clearing. Sassy hopped on my back before leaping after Images. I lifted my head and pushed myself onto my knees. Whoa. The clearing we'd fallen into was absolutely full of the cutest little critters I've ever seen. Tiny little puffballs of all colors were floating around the clearing. They had tiny feet with no arms and long, curly antennas on the top of their heads. A few of them tucked their feet and rolled around on the ground, bouncing off the trees. Their eyes were huge and almost took up their entire bodies. Imogen was doing a little dance. I found them! I found the Berglanders! She was covered in Berglanders from head to toe, who seemed to like her. They made happy peeping noises when she stroked them with one finger. Look! Well, Pertingers, too, Imogen said as she pointed. Little rabbits with deer antlers and bird wings hopped around the area, playing with the Berglanders. Sassy chased a few, but they ended up flying away before she could catch them. Squeaks looked hungry. She opened her beak to snap up some of the Walpertingers, but I said, Squeaks, no, leave them alone. Squeaks clamped her beak shut and gave me a pouty look. Such a drama queen. I can't believe it! Lily bats! Imogen squealed as she looked around at the trees. Bats, whose wings were in the shape of white flowers, fluttered from branch to branch. They literally looked like lilies that could fly. Name wasn't really original. I knew they were real, Imogen said. My grandfather hadn't been lying in all his stories. The creatures he described, they still exist. I bet there's other species out there that still exist too. They're just in hiding. That's pretty awesome we didn't kill them all, I said. I held out my hand to a yellow Berglander, and it hopped into it, bouncing around. I bet you can't wait to get back to the castle and rub it in everybody's face. Imogen's smile dropped, and the Berglanders clinging onto her floated away. She went to pick up Sassy. I don't think I'm going to tell anyone. Why? I put the yellow Berglander down. This is what you've always said was real. Wouldn't it be nice to have some proof and prove everybody wrong? It's better for people to think that I'm crazy than put these creatures at risk, she said softly. If people know these creatures are still around, then they'll come here to their habitat and put their ecosystem at risk. I can't do that to animals who are barely clinging to existence as it is. Imogen was way cooler than me, and way nicer. If I were her, I couldn't wait to get back to Orenda and brag to everyone about how I was right and they were wrong. She had such a good heart. It was adorable. I momentarily lost a sense of whatever judgment I had. There wasn't much, I tell you, and kissed her. It lasted for less than 2 seconds. Imogen freaked out and pushed me off of her. Ugh, what the hell? I was totally grossed out and regretting doing it immediately. I spat a few times on the ground and said, yep, still definitely into guys. Ew, Imogen wiped her mouth. Jonah, why did you do that? I don't really know. I shrugged. Seemed right for the moment. That? Really? I shrugged again. I'm a lover. What can I say? Ugh, Imogen yelled again. She reached into her basket and grabbed a water bottle to gargle with before she spat out and said, let's go back. I don't want to disturb these creatures too much longer. You got it. I whistled for Squeaks. Now that Squeaks wasn't hunting Walpertingers, they were all over her. She shook them off and attempted to get back to the trees. I had to push her through them again. Ancestors, squeakers, you need more cardio, I breathed as she struggled to keep up with me and Imogen. Her tongue was hanging out past her beak. I needed more cardio. Hiking through these woods was really wearing me out. Wanted to go back to my dorm room where I could binge on ESPN, video games, and beer for the rest of the weekend. You're not going to tell anybody about them, are you? Imogen asked me nervously. Berlangers? Of course I'm not going to tell anybody. Your secret's safe with me, I said, crossing my heart before I rubbed my hippogriff's head. Me and Squeaky won't say a word about it. I paused. When we say anyone, do you mean Liam and Sophia too? Liam would just say that I was lying, Imogen said, waving her hand. And I really want to tell Sophia, but that would mean talking about the unmentionable thing. Right, I said, dragging it out. Already forgot it happened. I hope to the ancestors we don't tell anyone what we did in the forest. Ever, she said, crossing her arms. Yeah, I said. I wouldn't want anyone thinking that I'm bi. That would be a disaster for my dating career. Then why'd you do it then? Listen, hon, a kiss between two friends, it's no big thing, I said. Then I added, well, unless you're Liam. That one I got punched in the face for. Imogen laughed. You're weird, Jonah. We're weird. I put my arm around her shoulders. We're weird together. And we're the best thing this damn school has ever seen. Imogen smiled. Hey, Jonah, do you want to join the Glitter Gang? I don't know what that is, but yes, absolutely, I said immediately. That's like the most badass name ever. You can't tell anybody about that either, Imogen said. It'll just be me, you, Sassy, and Squeaks. Sign me up, I told her. We could solve crimes and shit and protect endangered magical creatures, but caves are off the list. Imogen put her arm around my waist and agreed. Caves are off the list.
This concludes The Hidden Forest. Read more about Imogen and Jonah in the Academy of Magical Creatures series. Continue listening to enjoy another Hidden Legends short story. The Secret Passage, Academy of Magical Creatures short story. Written by Megan Linski and Alicia Radis. Narrated by Hannah Sharafian and Zachary Boersma. Chapter 1. Imogen. cryptozoology was the bomb, and nobody knew it. Like, seriously. There were 6 of us in the class, and one of them thought he was signing up for a cryptocurrency class. Like he was going to be mining bitcoins off the internet or something. I guess the only reason it was still offered as an elective was because Professor Macaulay begged the deans to bring it back once she started subbing again. Said it was the best class she ever took. You know, centuries ago, since the lady was old as dirt. But she was awesome, too. And passionate. All she needed was a little color in her wardrobe and she'd be, like, my favorite person in all of Arenda Academy. "Everyone, settle down," she commanded. For a woman on the brink of 100 years old, she had a firm voice. "We have a lot to cover today, so I'll need your full attention." She began walking down the rows of desks, handing out printouts, since our class didn't come with a textbook. It was dark in here, since the class was held in the dungeons. I wasn't sure if that was because the deans had shoved us down here, or if Professor Macaulay had requested it. She kind of reminded me of a vampire, but in a good way, like she'd burn in the sun if it touched her skin. It wasn't saying much, since her familiar, Bram, was a Wendigo. He literally looked like a Halloween decoration, with black skin suctioned to his bony horse skeleton and a bare deer skull for a head. This was a school for magical creatures, after all, but Bram was more creepy than magical. Speaking of which, Halloween was coming up. I wanted to dress up. I was thinking the Mad Hatter, but I still couldn't find a costume that really screamed Imogen. Seriously, did no one have any taste in fashion anymore? Professor Macaulay handed me a sheet of paper. Sassy placed her paws on top of my desk and stood on her hind legs to get a good look. "Ooh," I sang, petting my fox familiar's fur. "An Ellipse. I've never heard of them before." The picture beside the text showed a drawing of a small creature, no bigger than Sassy. It had a long trunk like an elephant's, with big elephant ears and huge eyes. Its fur was so fluffy that it looked like a cloud. It looked more like a cartoon drawing than a real magical creature, which meant I was in love with it already. I wanted desperately to cuddle one. Professor Macaulay returned to the front of the room. "Who can tell me what they know about Ellipses?" She glanced to me, expecting an answer. I was always the first with my hand up in the air, but this time I kept to myself. "I've never heard of them," I said honestly. "No, I don't suspect any of you have," Professor Macaulay said. "They are rare creatures, so rare that most people believe they never existed in the first place." It wasn't surprising, considering we were sitting in a cryptozoology class. In other words, a class based around the pseudoscience of creatures from folklore. You'd think more people in Campago would believe in these things, considering dragons and unicorns roamed free across our lands. But no. Even those bonded to magical creatures wouldn't believe anything they hadn't seen with their own 2 eyes. Freaking losers. How could you live life like that? I liked to think all of the creatures we learned about in this class existed at one time or another. And I knew for a fact some of them were still out there. I'd seen a Berlanger myself a few months back. "According to Hawkeye lore," Professor Macaulay continued, "Ellipses have an incredible sense of direction and wonderful eyesight. They use their trunk to call a signal that can be heard for miles. Legend says the Hawkeye used them as cave explorers when they came to these lands, since they could navigate the tunnels without getting lost, and could signal to their elementi when they found safe passage." I shot my hand into the air as I read ahead on the handout. Professor Macaulay raised a curious eyebrow. "Yes, Imogen?" I sat up a little straighter as all eyes turned toward me. It says here that the Yapluma made them up. I could see them doing it, too. My bestie Jonah was a Yapluma, an air elemental, and he had a serious thing against caves. Said there wasn't enough air down there. It wasn't an uncommon fear among the Yapluma. The air house could have told the others that their Ellipses were exploring the caves instead of them, so they didn't look like such sissies. Do you think there's merit to the legends? I asked. Like, could Ellipses have been real at one point? Ancestors, I hoped so. They looked like such gentle, lovable creatures. I believe anything is possible, Professor Macaulay answered, sounding as if she was reflecting on the wisdom she'd gained in her long life. That said, if they ever did exist, they're extinct by now. There haven't been reports of a bonding with an Ellipse for at least 100 years. I frowned as she continued on her lecture. It didn't sound hopeful that there was still a group of Ellipses out there. But if there were, the Glitter Gang would be on the case right away. The Glitter Gang was mine and Jonah's secret group. Just the two of us and our familiars. Our goal was to find lost species and ensure their protection, though we'd only gone on one expedition so far. If you could call it that. I stroked Sassy's fur and whispered lowly, maybe it's time we get the Glitter Gang back together again. Jonah and I were supposed to meet up later that week, but we got totally sidetracked on Friday. Shit went down with our friends, and we had to help. It led to one of our besties, Liam, telling us he'd found something incredible. Finally, after an entire afternoon of suspense, Jonah, Sophia, and I met up with Liam. He led us up to the 3rd floor of the school, to the southernmost tower. I didn't know what the guy was thinking because this tower was off limits. I didn't like breaking the rules, and the tower was said to be dangerous. But, peer pressure and all of that. My friends went ahead, so I followed. And I tell you, I was not disappointed. When we reached the top, I inhaled a sharp breath. It was the Anichi dorms, the lost rooms of the Soul House who died off 100 years ago. It had been amazing. Liam had found it. Well, it was official. This place was sweet and secluded. We kind of just agreed it'd be our new hideout. We'd just have to clean it up. That's what led us to Saturday. Sophia had the flu, and Liam wanted to take care of her, so we were 2 people down from our usual group, which left Jonah and me alone to start cleaning the dorms ourselves, which was totes fine with me. I mean, Liam and Sophia were great, but they didn't really have the decorating tastes that Jonah and I had. Then again, after listening to Jonah talk about how he was going to glam it up for his man cave, I wasn't so sure he understood good design either. I wanted to keep the original Anichi artwork, while he wanted to hang tulle and streamers and turn at least 3 of the dorm rooms into his personal makeup studio.
We'll knock these 2 walls down, and then there'll be enough room for my costume collection, Jonah offered.
He gestured to the walls on either side of us. Squeaks, his hippogriff familiar, swished her tail in agreement beside him. Sassy looked up at the 2 of them, seeming less than pleased. We stood in the 2nd bedroom off the common room. The common room took up the entire tower, while the dorms spread across the main section of the 4th floor. The best we could tell, however, the only way to get into the dorms from the outside was through the common room. Even most of the windows had been boarded up. There was a thick layer of dust on the floor, and all the furniture was gone from the bedrooms. I guess they'd salvaged most of it before they boarded up the tower. Jonah seemed to think this was fortunate for him, so he wouldn't have to move so much aside to set up his dance studio across the hallway, which I assumed meant he wanted to knock even more walls down. I swatted Jonah in the shoulder. We can't go knocking down walls.
Why not?
He gave me a fake pout. Ancestors, this man sometimes. I held up a finger and started counting off. For one,
I don't remember you majoring in architecture. We could compromise the structure of the castle. 2, we're only here to clean up. We want to preserve the castle as it was when anthology students lived here. 3, if someone heard us knocking down walls, it could blow our cover. Jonah grumbled. Looks like I'll just have 3 rooms to myself. I rolled my eyes. Take all the rooms you want. Just don't ruin anything. Fine, he agreed. Let's go see what furniture they did leave behind. I'm gonna need a massive mirror for makeup room number 1. I smirked at him and turned out of the room to lead everyone down the hall. We passed by endless rooms that all looked identical to one another. There were old chests of drawers, chairs, and dressers left behind, but it was all scarce and nothing much worth salvaging. We even found a communal bathroom, with working showers and everything. As we continued down the hall, Jonas stopped in every room with a piece of furniture left to check it out, but he said none of the chairs were tall enough for him. He drew a sharp breath when we passed by a room with a wardrobe standing against the far wall. Imogen! He squealed, bouncing on his toes into the room. Look how pretty! Wow, I said. I couldn't deny it. At least Jonah and I shared taste when it came to good antiques. I stepped up to the wardrobe and ran my fingers across the dusty doors. They were made of thick mahogany and carved in intricate patterns that reminded me of ancient anthology art. Beautiful brass knobs had the sigil of the Soul House etched into them, an intricate swirling design that I became absorbed in while looking at. Jonah opened the wardrobe and stuck his head inside. Do you know how many costumes I could fit in this? We have to move it down the hall. I eyed it up and down. Yeah, it was beautiful, but it looked heavy as shit. Did he really expect me to help him move it? I was all of 5 feet tall. Maybe we should wait until Sophia and Liam can help, I suggested. Jonah closed the doors and waved a hand. Nonsense. We can move it just fine. Squeaks will help, won't you, girl? Squeaks nodded eagerly. Easy for you to say, I joked. Jonah was huge. He could probably carry his hippogriff on his back if he wanted to. Come on, Im. Jonah stepped up to the wardrobe and wrapped his hands around the back side. He yanked on it, and the feet scraped along the hardwood floor. Stop! I cried. You're ruining the original flooring. Then come help. He squatted down like he was going to pick the whole thing up himself. On 3? I stepped up to the wardrobe and pushed with everything I had, but it didn't feel like I was doing anything. Jonah managed to get it away from the wall enough that Squeaks squeezed in behind the back and pushed with her shoulder. That was when I caught sight of a hinge behind the wardrobe. There was a door. Wait, I cried. I nudged Squeaks and she backed onto my toe. Ow! Sassy growled, but I assured her I was fine. What? Jonah asked, wiping sweat off his brow. What is it? I stared at the wall behind the wardrobe, and a wide smile slowly crept across my face. I think there's a reason that wardrobe was placed there. Look! I pointed, and Jonah peeked behind the heavy piece of furniture. He drew a sharp breath, but it quickly turned into a scowl. Jonah didn't do caves, and he definitely didn't do secret passageways. I smirked. Secret passageways were totally my thing. Let's check it out. Jonah crossed his arms. I think you were right. There's a reason this wardrobe was here. We probably shouldn't move it. I placed a hand on my hip and gave him the look. Don't bail on me now, beautiful. You wanted this wardrobe? You're getting it. And I'm getting a look inside this door. Jonah huffed, but he knew he couldn't talk me out of it. It took all our strength, and Squeaks, with Sassy helping where she could, to move the wardrobe far enough away that we could stand in front of the door. When I finally got a good look at it, I was astonished. The carvings within the door were even more intricate than that of the wardrobe. It was rounded at the top, like the double doors to the entrance of the castle, but small, like it had been made to be easy to hide. I reached for the handle and tried twisting it, but it didn't budge. Jonah breathed out a sigh of relief. "Well, looks like we're not getting in." I scowled at him. "Why would you want to, anyway?" Jonah asked. "What's so exciting about an old door?" He cut off as a muffled sound came from the other side. It sounded like a whimper, a cry for help. We exchanged a quick, wide-eyed look. His was one of terror, like we should just lock this room and hightail it out of there. Mine was a look of surprise. "Something's in there," I said breathlessly. "Which is exactly why we should leave," Jonah said, shooting a nervous glance at the door. "There's probably a reason it's hiding there. You know, because it's dangerous." "No," I said firmly. It sounded like it was scared. "It needs our help."
Chapter 2. Jonah. Look, hun, air elementals don't do small spaces. Creepy secret passageways in the middle of castles included. And now my best bitch wanted me to squeeze myself into another tiny hole? I mean, not that I wasn't good at it under certain sexual circumstances, but come on. Imogen had already forced me into a cave last time. I had to save her before her pretty little ass wouldn't be eaten alive by some scary creature. Now she wanted to open up a rando door to nowhere? "No thank you, sweet pea," I said. I crossed my arms and shook my head. "I'm not going in there." The noise happened again. Whatever was behind that door sounded small and pathetic, like someone had grabbed the last pair of designer shoes that were on sale. A true worst nightmare. "You took an oath. The Glitter Gang is supposed to protect all magical creatures," Imogen said, and she stood up to give me a salute. "There's a poor animal trapped back there. You can't just walk away." I glanced at the door. Squeaks clacked her beak and gave me an encouraging look. I had rolled my eyes and let out a dramatic sigh. OMG. Fine, but I swear, if I end up getting blood on my jeans from this thing biting my leg off, you're buying me a new pair. Gucci, honey. I grabbed the handle and yanked, but the door wouldn't budge. Okay, now I knew this was def shady. I could bench press over 300 pounds at the gym. I should have been able to pull this door off like it was a toothpick. I put my foot up against the wall as an added brace, but the door wouldn't open. "Put your back into it," Imogen piped, bouncing up and down at my side. "Well, it'd be nice if you helped," I shouted back. I let go and wiped my beautifully glistening forehead. Well, we tried. Might as well give up. The creature behind the door gave a lonely noise again, and Imogen said, "Let us use our elements. Together. 1, 2, 3. Imogen threw out her hands, and the stone archway around the door cracked due to her earth magic. Squeaks ran forward at the door as the same time I blasted my air magic at the door. Head down. She stampeded through it, and the door fell down. We waited as the dust cleared. As I obviously guessed, the secret passage was small, dark, and damp. Ancestors only knew where it led. I heard padded footsteps running the opposite way down the passage. Whatever creature was hiding behind the door had bolted. "Come back!" Imogen cried. She ran full speed down the dark hallway with Sassy following. "Imogen, you hoe!" I shouted. Way to run blindly into the dark towards ancestors only knew what. I felt a nudge on my shoulder. Squeaks was behind me, and she held a flashlight in her beak from the toolbox we'd brought with us earlier. "Thanks, girlfriend." I took it from her and turned it on. The light illuminated the passageway as I ran after Imogen. As I guessed, it was pretty cramped in here. And, ew, the walls were sticky. A big guy like me had to hunch down to get through. I swear to Beyonce Knowles and all of Destiny's Child, Imogen owed me for this one. She was totally getting me that eyeshadow palette we were looking at yesterday. Finally, I caught up to Imogen at the end of the hall. She and Sassy were kneeling down next to another doorway. "If you think I'm going through that door too, you've obviously lost your mind," I gasped. I was having major claustrophobia already. A diva meltdown was coming. I just knew it. Imogen didn't answer. Instead, she turned around with a huge smile on her face. Sassy wagged her tail at Imogen's feet. In Imogen's arms was the absolute cutest familiar that I've ever seen. He looked like a miniature elephant, but he was made out of what seemed like soft pink fur, a puffy cloud surrounding him. He was no bigger than Sassy was. The creature's soft trunk caressed Imogen's arms, as if it was happy about being rescued. "Oh my gosh," I squealed. It was like totally adorable. "What the WTF is that?" "It's an Elfie," Imogen squeaked. "We learned about them in my cryptozoology class. They're supposed to be extinct." The Elfie raised its trunk and let out a tiny toot. I was falling in love with him already. "Can we keep it? Please?" I begged. He'd be like our hidden mascot." "Hold on. He's hurt." Imogen lifted him to show me, and I saw that on his leg the Elfie had a long gash, one that was slightly bleeding. "It's limping, and it's struggling to walk on its own. We should help it." "There's a ton of medical shit in the common room. Liam brought his extra supplies up here in case of emergencies," I said. Liam had a chronic illness, and I tell you that man was better stocked than a hospital. "Let's go." Imogen jogged back the way we came. I let out a sigh of relief when we left the secret passage. Totally F that place, you know? No way I was going down there again. Imogen placed the Elfie on the table in the common room. I went to the bathroom and got a wet washcloth so that we could clean the Elfie's cut. Imogen gently wiped the dirt and dried blood away from the wound. It didn't look that deep, which was good. Squeak sniffed at the Elfie while Sassy observed it with a tilting head. I gave the Elfie a dish of water to drink. It sucked the water out of the dish and squirted it out of its trunk at Squeak's, soaking her face. Sassy scattered. Imogen and I laughed while Squeak sourly shook out her feathers. The Elfie gave happy toots. "Some monster you were totally afraid of," Imogen said with a laugh. "I mean, seeing as how we were almost dinner last time we chased after a magical creature, I had my reasons," I objected. "It should be healed up in a few days," Imogen said. She started wrapping the Elfie's leg with gauze. "The question is, what are we to do with you?" "We keep him here. He needs a name," I said. "What about Alejandro?" "Nah, sounds too much like a stripper name. Scratch that." "We can't keep him. He's an endangered creature," Imogen argued, "which is exactly why he should stay up here with us. The Glitter Gang can protect him." I slung my arm around Squeaks' shoulders. She clacked her beak and grumbled, as if letting the Elfie hang out in our hideout was an idea she didn't agree with. "We don't even know what he eats. He should be reintroduced to his natural habitat. We should take him back to the passageway," Imogen said. "Okay, no magical creature has a dirty passageway for a habitat," I told her. "This is obviously an air creature. They're supposed to be, you know, in a place that has air." "Elfies are supposed to be cave explorers. A dark hallway is perfect for that," Imogen said. "Plus, no one knows these dorms exist but us, so no one will be able to find them in the passageway." "Yeah, but how do you know that for sure?" I asked. "If these creatures supposedly went extinct, no one's been able to study them for probably decades. It might like the forest just as much as a cave. Probably got stuck back there somehow." Imogen scowled. You're right. I don't know. But then how did it get in that passage in the first place? It looks completely blocked off. There's no telling where the other door goes." Once the Elfie's wound was bandaged, he let out a little trumpet. He jumped into the air and began to sail around the room on his little cloud. Sassy spun in circles on the floor as she watched the Elfie go round and round. "Holy ancestors, he can fly!" Imogen said in excitement. "An elephant that can fly? I told you it doesn't belong in a cave," I shouted. The Elfie landed on the couch and trumpeted. Squeaks ran at him, but he took off again. "Looks like the Glitter Gang has done it again," I said, and I gave Imogen a high five. Rescuing endangered magical creatures, investigating dark and scary places, and occasionally celebrating with mimosas and male strip shows. Speaking of which, we haven't gotten to part 3 yet, Im? Im? She was ignoring me. "It looks hungry." Imogen put her hands on her hips as she watched the Elfie fly. "We should go down to the Familiar Nutrition Center and get a bunch of food. See what it likes." "That's a good idea. Be good, Alejandro," I called out and waved to the Elfie. Squeaks and Sassy followed us downstairs as we left the Elfie in the common room. "We should see where the other door leads," Imogen said as she hurried down the stairs. I shook my head. No way. I'm not going down there again to see what crazy places that other door leads to. You go ahead." "You're no fun," Imogen frowned. Should we tell Liam and Sophia about the passageway? I thought we agreed that what happens with the Glitter Gang stays with the Glitter Gang, I objected. Besides, if we tell Liam and Sophia, Sophia will want to go look. Liam will complain about it, but follow her anyway. And before you know it, the four of us will be dragged off on some other adventure. Probably one that's just as life-threatening as all the rest. That's probably right, Imogen sighed. I'd like to see where the passage leads to, but I guess it's not necessary. It could collapse on us or something. Who knows? A short time later, Imogen and I returned with bags of familiar food, one that Squeaks and Sassy kept on trying to poke their heads in. We returned to the Anichi common room, but once we got back, it was dead silent. There was no happy toot to welcome us back. With a glance around the room, I saw that the Elfie was missing. "Oh no!" Imogen shouted. "Alejandro's gone! Someone must have taken him." "Or he escaped," I suggested. Imogen and I both dropped the feed bags on the floor, and Squeaks and Sassy pounced on them. I did a quick walk around the room, but we'd left all the other doors to the dorms closed, so he couldn't have gotten into any of those. "How could he have escaped? There was nowhere for him to go," Imogen said in a sad voice. One of the windows in the common room was unlatched and left hanging partially open. It was big enough of a gap for an Elfie to slip through. "I think he flew out," I pointed to the open window. Imogen walked over and looked at it with a fallen face. "I didn't know Elfies could open latches. They must be really smart." Imogen sighed, but a small smile crossed her face. "Well, I guess it's for the best. Now Alejandro can probably go back to its herd, if he has one." "It's okay. The Glitter Gang is supposed to be about rescuing endangered magical creatures, not keeping them," I said. "We rescued Alejandro, and that's all that counts." Imogen stared out the open window. "I guess so. I just hope someday we'll see him again." "Maybe we will," I said. Sassy and Squeaks both had their heads buried in the familiar feed bags and were chowing down. Sassy was happily munching on a rabbit. Meanwhile, Squeaks brought her head up and munched upon a handful of hay in a happy manner, beak chomping and eyes half open in bliss. I strolled over to my hippogriff and patted her shoulders. "Oh, Squeaky, you're such a fugly slut."
This concludes The Secret Passage. Embark on new adventures with Imogen and Jonah in the Academy of Magical Creatures series. Continue listening to enjoy another Hidden Legends short story.
The Silver Crown, University of Sorcery short story. Written by Megan Linski and Alicia Radis. Narrated by Amy Hall and A.J. Carter. Chapter 1. Odette. Whoopsie! That spell didn't go as planned. I sat in the alchemy lab at Arcania University, coughing and sputtering. Smoke filled the room, wafting over the desks and cauldrons. I hurried to open a window and let out the smoke, waving a hand over my nose. I was in my first semester at Arcania University, studying to be a sorceress. I couldn't say I was bad at it, but I wasn't very good yet either. The potion I'd been making had blown up, ruining the brew and my outfit. I shrieked as I saw the remnants of the potion all over my pretty pinky dress, the one I'd sewn a feather boa around the hem. I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror and shrieked in surprise, giving a little jump. "Oh no! My hair's a frizz." I stopped to ponder if a frizz was a word, before I shook my head and cast a spell. The pretty pink sparkles settled over my hair, face, and clothes, leaving my blonde mane smooth and my dress brilliant as ever. I did say mane on purpose. I'm an alicorn fairy, after all. Dreams of the beautiful winged unicorns danced in my head, and I sighed dreamily. One day, I'd find my big, strong, handsome hunk of a mate, and we'd dance into the sunset together. Or something like that. Tears broke into my eyes when I thought about all the cute fae babies we'd make together, out of our passionate love. I wanted him to rip his shirt off and fight some other guy for me, then kidnap me against my will and take me to an island in the middle of the ocean, where we'd have lots of steamy encounters. That's what happened in all those hot romance novels I'd borrowed from Del Mar anyway, so I figured it should work that way. I hope my mate, wherever he was out there, was sexy. Did that mean our babies would be sexy too? Did sexy babies even exist? That sounded weird.
Odette, are you all right?
A voice of concern broke up my lovely daydream. Theo popped inside, his blonde hair a mess and appearing quite puzzled. Theo was an alicorn shifter and my very closest friend. We'd been ballet partners since we were very little. I'd known him before I'd known anybody. Well, I guess not my parents because that would be weird. But my first memory I could recall was of Theo and I, practicing our turns in ballet class. I couldn't imagine being closer to a single person on this earth. "I'm okay," I called. I frowned as I looked at the melted remnants of my cauldron. But I don't think Professor Hemlock will be happy.
Doubt it.
Theo looked at the cauldron with a frown.
I was worried you were hurt.
How did he even know I was down here? I gave him a bright smile and said, "Nope, just practicing. I should clean this up. I'm already behind on my 10-step plan for the day." I paused. Or was it 12 steps? No, that's not right. I should check my journal because I already forgot. I waved my hand and the melted cauldron vanished, along with the rest of my crappy potion that I'd made, because I'm a loser, but a cute loser anyhow.
What are you doing?
Theo asked as I began gathering things into my bag, humming happily as I did so. I have to go into the woods. Professor Hemlock requested we gather starweed for our alchemy class tomorrow, and I want to be well prepared, I said.
Starweed grows deep in the forest,
Theo said.
I should come with you.
I can handle it myself, silly. I lightly pushed his chest in a playful way. I have magic.
And yet there are monsters about, which means you should be safe.
Theo insisted.
I'll accompany you into the woods.
Okay, I changed my mind about going alone. Things were much more fun with friends. I went skipping on my merry way out of the university and to the grounds. Theo followed me as we left campus and headed into the dark, spooky, scary woods. Which were quite dark and spooky, I might add. Did I mention scary? Gods, I was repeating myself again. I gave a little whimper, and Theo moved closer.
It's all right. I'll protect you.
Theo looped his hand in mine, and my worries went away. Whenever I touched Theo, I got this magical feeling in my chest. I felt like I was soaring in the air, fluttering my wings and looking down upon the world. He could make me feel like no one else could. Like, as long as I had him, I could conquer anything. It was such a great thing we were such good friends, wasn't it? I bounced at Theo's side, but my good mood was ruined, I tell you, by the awful sight we met near the river once we got to the patch where the starweed grew. My mouth dropped open in horror, and I gave a great gasp at the scene. It was like the greatest crisis I'd ever experienced. Or, at least, that I'd experienced today. Oh, bother. I stomped my foot. Some meanie got here first and took all the starweed. And it was true. The area by the river had been completely ripped up. All the starweed had been taken, probably by the other girls in my class. Damn it. I knew I should have gone to the river 3 days ago like Hemlock asked, and not waited until the last minute, even though I'd forgotten. What was I doing here again?
It's not all bad,
Theo said, kneeling by the river.
There's a bit left here.
Goody! I raced forward and plucked the few remaining strands of starweed from the ground. I shoved them in my bag and said, "Well, that's over with. Now we can get back to school and, My tiny words got tinier as I saw a looming shape rear out of the river. It was a beautiful woman with long, silky, blue-green hair, covered in a thin dress that was more or less see-through. Scales coated her skin, and she had the deepest black eyes that anyone could fall into. Uh-oh. That was a rusalka. They were mistresses of the water, similar to mermaids, except they really didn't like men that much, and lured boys to their deaths by drowning them. Not the pleasantest creatures we could come across. The rusalka screeched and lashed out a hand. From the river, a tangled mess of vines erupted. I summoned my wings and flew out of the way. The buzzing of my pink butterfly wings hummed in my ear as I got out of harm's way. But Theo wasn't so fortunate, sorry to say. The vines from the river wrapped around his body. Theo struggled until he gritted his teeth and shifted into an alicorn. His white pelt shone in the sunlight, and his horns sparkled as he used his wings to rip apart the vines and break free. Have I ever told anyone how amazing Theo looks in horsey form? I mean, the muscles. Theo went to gallop away, but the rusalka summoned more vines, and they wrapped around his legs and hooves, trapping him. Theo squealed, trying to break free as the rusalka pulled him toward the water to drown him. "Hey, put him down," I demanded. I landed on the ground and stomped toward the rusalka because I was mad. The rusalka looked at me. Her big black eyes got even bigger, and she recoiled the vines from Theo's legs. Theo snorted and came close, lowering his horn in front of me.
Stay back,
He warned the rusalka. The rusalka tossed her long hair behind her. I needed to ask her about her hair care routine because, damn, I wanted a mane like that. And dove back into the river. She was gone for a few moments, then popped back up again. I readied for another attack, but instead, the rusalka rose from the river once more. She placed something on the edge of the shore at my feet. It was a silver crown, one that had a twisted design holding blue gemstones in place. It was so dazzling. "Pretty," I gushed. I went forward to take it, but Theo stood in my way.
don't take it.
He warned.
It could be a bad fairy contract.
"No contract," the rusalka said. She began to dip down into the water. "Just an offering." What a strange thing to say. Theo bent down to sniff the crown.
This has strong magic.
"Do you think there's a curse or a hex on it?" I asked anxiously.
I don't think so.
Theo changed back into a man and picked up the crown. He examined it before he handed it to me.
There's nothing wrong with it. It's safe.
Ooh. I snatched the crown and looked at it more closely. I'd never seen something like it in all my days, which I guess wasn't saying much because I was barely 18 years old and all, but still. Theo hovered over me.
I wondered why she gave you that. Rusalka are some of the deadliest monsters that the Fae know. She should have killed us.
But she didn't, I said. It was like it was meant for me. That's what all those romance novels would say anyhow.
Rusalka are cousins to the ancient druids.
Theo said as we began walking the length of the river back to the university.
They haven't been seen in ages. I'm surprised she let us go.
Me too, and with a gift. I held the crown up to the sky. I can't wait to show Emma and the others. I bet they'll love— Oh no! I tripped. Theo caught me, but the crown slipped out of my hands. I let out a gasp as I watched the crown tumble out of my fingers and back into the river beside us.
Chapter 2. Theo. Well, that was a stroke of bad luck. I frowned as I watched the crown the rusalka had given Odette sink to the bottom of the river, into the darkness of the deep. Odette let out one of those cute noises she was famous for, and rushed to the river's edge.
Theo! The crown!
It's gone now, I said. I suppose we'll just have to leave it. I turned my back on her and looked into the forest. Sun is setting. It should be dark in an hour. We should return to the university before more monsters. I turned back around and nearly choked. Odette had removed her clothes. She folded her pants, jacket, and shirt in a neat pile, placing them by the side of the river. She was dressed in nothing more than her underwear. By the gods, her panties and bra were so thin that if I looked close enough, I'd see straight through them. What are you doing? I managed to stutter.
Obviously, we need to go back into the river and get the crown thingy,
she demanded.
A rusalka gave it to us, and that doesn't happen every day.
What if that's part of her plan, to lure us in? I asked. Odette waved her hand.
You worry too much. If she wanted to kill us, she would have by now.
I didn't know for sure, but I was distracted from the concept of danger by the immense effort of keeping my eyes on Odette's face and not on the sight of her pink nipples poking through her thin bralette. Be a gentleman, I hastily reminded myself. We'd gone skinny dipping as children. This should be normal. And yet, I hated to point this out, but her body had definitely changed since then. It had gotten all these curves, and her skin was softer, and she smelled very good. Not to mention there were parts of her on display that I was very sure the gods were tormenting me with. I'd be a liar if I said my mind hadn't wandered to places it shouldn't go some nights when I was alone, often to the thought of her and I, alone in a soft bed. I felt miserable for even having such risque thoughts. She was a beautiful lady. I would do well to respect her.
Well, hurry!
Odette shouted. She had absolutely no reservations about being practically nude in front of me and jumped into the river. Her back was turned, so I adjusted myself and got to undressing. I was eager to get into the river to disguise my little problem. I hurried into the river in nothing but my boxers, shivering as the cold chill of the river hit my skin. Except the water didn't help. I could more or less see the outline of her breasts as the water made her bralette cling to her skin, revealing each part that I didn't dare to admit I'd imagined before. God, she's going to ruin me. I swallowed nervously and said, You, definitely aren't shy.
Why would I be? You make me feel so comfortable,
Odette gushed.
We're the best of friends.
That we are. I couldn't help but wish it could be more. It was like she had no idea of the feelings I had for her, and that hurt. How could she not know that she was the light of my existence? She was so adventurous and so good-natured. Her kind and optimistic heart was one I envied, though I knew I'd never be able to imitate it. The closest I'd ever get to being an optimist was having her in my life, which I was praying would be always. Shifters had mates, and I was more than certain Odette was my own, though I'd been too cowardly to tell her that, as of yet. Perhaps today was the day. Odette dove under the water. She came up several times with nothing but empty hands.
I can't see anything down there,
she shuddered. She put her arms around herself as her teeth chattered. Seeing her in any sort of discomfort was physically painful for me. You're going to catch a cold. Allow me. I took a deep breath, then dove underwater. I opened my eyes beneath the river and searched for the crown. I saw a glimmer of silver below me and reached down, retaining the crown within my grasp.
Yay! You found it!
Odette cried when I broke the surface, holding the crown in the air.
You're my hero!
She threw herself onto me. I enjoyed the hug, as I did each embrace Odette gave me, for her warmth was better than the sun itself. But this one was a bit more uncomfortable, as there was only a thin shred of fabric separating her breasts from my bare chest. I had to tilt my hips away so she wouldn't catch on. Odette climbed out of the river. Still soaking wet, she began to put her clothes back on, before she slipped the crown into her bag.
This is all very well. Wait until we told the others what we found.
I donned my clothes as quickly as possible, though the water soaked through them rather quickly. My shifter heat dried me and my clothes off as we walked back to school. Odette was still drenched beside me and starting to shake from the setting sun. You're shivering. Take my jacket. I slid it off my shoulders and draped it around her. She gave a light smile.
Thanks, Theo. You're the best.
Of course. I wrapped an arm around her to bring her close to my shifter heat. She clutched her bag to her side, and I had the thought that this was a very successful evening. I should tell her now. Take her to the cafeteria. Perhaps something by candlelight. No, that's stupid. What are you thinking? I went back and forth in my own mind until a twisting sensation in my gut made me pay attention, and I immediately went on alert. An alarm was going off within me, telling me we weren't alone in these woods. When Odette was in trouble, I always knew it. I'd felt when her cauldron had exploded earlier and came running. That was a big part of having a sorceress to protect. I always knew when my mate needed me, and those shifter senses were telling me she was in big trouble now. A snarl confirmed my suspicions. Odette and I both froze as a terrifying creature wound its way before us. It had the head and tail of a snake, the hooves and body of an ox, and the fur of a leopard coating its entire body. It was as large as I was in alicorn form, and venom dripped from its teeth as it hissed. A questing beast. Not something you wanted to find out here. A couple of strands of starweed dangled out of its mouth, between its sharp teeth. I suppose we now know where the starweed went. The questing beast roared. Odette let out an eek, and I pushed her out of the way. The jacket fell off her shoulders, trailing to the ground. I changed immediately and faced it head on. I put down my horn to charge as I stampeded toward the questing beast, though it spun out of the way. It used its large tail to knock me off my hooves, and I went sprawling to the ground.
Theo!
Odette cried.
I've got it!
I took to the air, though there wasn't much room to fly with all this tree cover. I put my head down and dove down, planning to ram my horn straight into the questing beast's spine. The questing beast rolled, and I had to flap my wings like mad to avoid crash landing on the ground. I spiraled out of control and landed harshly against the dirt. My body skidded against a tree, and I lay there, dazed.
Help!
Odette was trapped by the questing beast. She was cornered against a tree as the questing beast advanced on her, eyes wide and chest heaving with fear.
Hold on!
I struggled to get up, but my hooves slipped. Damn it, I was being too slow. Odette screamed. I became petrified as the questing beast lunged out its jaws. He was going to hurt her. I scrambled upward and ran her way, but I was too late. The questing beast launched outward with its fangs. Odette shrieked and put up a magical shield at the last minute. The questing beast let out a wild yelp as its face collided with the shield, but his teeth had snagged Odette's shirt, ripping it in the process. That wasn't the only thing. Odette's bag had gotten caught in its teeth, and he'd ripped it off of her. The questing beast ran off with its head down, rampaging into the woods with Odette's bag firmly in its mouth, taking the crown and all.
My bag!
Odette cried, reaching out a hand.
Get on my back!
Odette only had a little time to climb on before I took off at a gallop after the questing beast. I was faster than the beast was, and more easily able to maneuver through the trees, so I caught up to him easily. Yet I had to skid to a stop as the questing beast writhed into a giant hole in the earth, carved out of stone and dirt. It was a massive pit big enough for a dragon to fit through, one that had to descend for at least a mile into the ground, into darkness. The questing beast scrambled along the edge of the canyon until we saw it disappear into the depths of the earth. Odette jumped off my back and watched the questing beast vanish before she got a determined look on her face. I already was aware of what she was planning.
We need to fly down there.
Odette summoned her wings, ready to fly after the questing beast to retrieve her bag. I changed back into a man and caught her by the wrist. No, Odette, it's not safe. For all we know, there could be a whole nest of monsters down there.
But the crown!
She protested. It's not worth your life, I said calmly. Leave it be.
Oh.
Odette's head dropped.
I guess I'm not meant to have it.
I gave a wry smile. Well, you did lose it twice. She let out a weary sigh before her mood lifted once more. You couldn't keep her down for long.
I suppose I should look on the bright side. What a story to tell our friends! Today was such an adventure!
That it was, I agreed. Shame we lost that crown, though. It seemed valuable.
Oh well, we'll probably never see it again,
Odette said chipperly, and she looped her arm in mine as the sun set behind us.
After all, it's not like it was important.
This concludes The Silver Crown. Read more about Odette and Theo in the University of Sorcery series. Continue listening to hear another Hidden Legends short story.
The Music Box, College of Witchcraft short story. Written by Megan Linski and Alicia Radis. Narrated by Renee Kim and Caleb Summers. Chapter 1. Talia. Halloween was the best time of year. Ask any witch or warlock in the Merriamic Coven. We lived for this holiday. Though, honestly, I could do without the creepy spirits. Cool autumn air breezed through the streets of our small town, and the Appalachian Mountains looked beautiful with all their fall colors. Jack-o'-lanterns glowed from shop windows next to signs advertising mega sales. My cat, Gus, prowled at my side as we followed behind my friends. I shivered as I walked past an abandoned shop. An odd sensation crept across my skin, like spiders were crawling over me. The shop windows were so dark that I couldn't see inside, and the paint on the door was peeling. The words, "Mystic Wands," were barely visible on the glass anymore, as they'd worn away over the years. The shop was a real eyesore in the middle of Octavia Falls, which was such a beautiful town. I supposed creepy was a good thing this time of year, though. The veil between the living and the dead was thin today, and we didn't want any malevolent spirits in our midst. We wore costumes and hung scary decorations to frighten the spirits away. "You okay, Talia?" Grant asked. He must have noticed my unease. I shot a glance at the dark shop. "I'm fine. It's just, that place gives me the creeps." "Any visions?" he asked. I shook my head. I was a seer. My psychic gift worked through touch, and I hadn't touched anything inside that weird shop. To be honest, I didn't want any visions of that place. There was a dark energy around it, and all I wanted was to run far, far away. "Let's just keep moving," I suggested, turning back toward my other friends.
"If we're voting on the best costume, I think Mandy wins," Amy said from ahead of us.
"No, mine's the best," Miles argued. He was dressed as a police officer and was trying to convince us his costume was amazing. I mean, it wasn't bad, but Mandy's skeleton makeup was incredible. Amy was dressed as a bat, and I wore a peacock costume. Miles gestured to himself. "Come on, Amy. Tell me this isn't hot." Miles must have been cold, because he wore shorts with his costume. Honestly, he looked more like a stripper than a real police officer, but I was pretty sure that's what he was going for. He loved all the attention. Grant laughed. He was Miles' older brother and a year older than me. A junior at Merriam College of Witchcraft. He looked totally sexy in his Phantom of the Opera costume. His suit hugged his ass perfectly, and I'd be lying if I said I hadn't checked him out a few times. "You did not just ask Amy if she thinks you're hot," Grant said. Amy smirked as she eyed Miles' costume.
"You know I'm not attracted to guys, right?"
Miles had his head high. "Yeah, but you can still admit I look pretty dang..." A high-pitched scream tore through the streets, and I stopped dead in my tracks. Miles jumped away from a nearby shop window so fast that he ran straight into Amy and Mandy. He nearly knocked them both over. His cat, Kiki, hissed. It took me a second to realize the scream had come from Miles. "Dear Goddess!" I cried. "Are you okay?" Miles pointed to the shop window. I thought it was a real person." A skeleton stood in the window of Hollowed Harmonica, a cute music shop I loved to visit. The skeleton moved on its own, plucking the strings of a double bass. Amy chuckled. "I told you guys Miles freaked out at haunted houses. Do you believe me now?" "Oh, I believe you," Grant said, stepping toward the shop window. "It's just a skeleton." Grant lifted his hand, and the skeleton mirrored his movement. They waved at each other, then the skeleton curled its index finger, inviting us inside. It was nothing to be afraid of, just a skeleton enchanted with necromancy magic. To be fair to Miles, this was a real person at one point, Grant pointed out with a smirk. But He's harmless. Ugh. Why use a real skeleton, though? Miles asked, shaking off his nerves. Lots of people donate their bones to the Coven after death, Mandy pointed out. I've been thinking about it myself. It's kind of nice to know my bones could be used to brighten someone's day, even after I'm gone, or be used to scare them. Boo! She jumped at Miles, and he leapt back. He quickly composed himself and crossed his arms. I'm not scared, he insisted. Sure you aren't, I teased. Let's go inside. I love this place. Mandy sighed. I forgot about hallowed harmonica. I blew all my cash at Winifred's. Girl, I don't blame you, I told her. That dress sale was killer. Miles frowned. Let's not use that word on Halloween, okay? Grant rolled his eyes and nudged his brother toward the door. You're being dramatic. You'd be scared too if you visited the haunted house earlier, Miles cried. I know how you get with ghosts. I'm not scared of ghosts, Grant insisted as we entered the music shop. At least I can talk to them, Miles shot back. He wore a goofy smile, like that somehow proved his brother wrong. Grant frowned. You say that like I have a choice. All witches and warlocks had different powers. Miles and I were both seers, but our powers were different. He could see and talk to ghosts, and I got visions when I touched different objects. Grant, on the other hand, was an alchemist. He could brew potions, and he was pretty damn good at it, too. Ugh, there I go again. I couldn't stop admiring Grant lately. Ever since I realized how I truly felt about him, I couldn't get him off my mind. I kept saying I wasn't ready to date, not after my last relationship went down in flames. But I was starting to think maybe I was ready. I just wished he'd ask me on a date already. I knew if I looked at him, my feelings would show, so I pretended to browse the shop instead. Hallowed Harmonica wasn't like other music stores, and that's why it was my favorite shop in town. The owner, Monica, was really nice and let me come in and play the baby grand piano whenever I wanted. She said her cat Binks loved it when he had someone to duet with. He was quite musically inclined for a cat. Binks sat on the main counter, running his paws over a miniature harp. Gus made a beeline for Binks and hopped up on the counter beside him. My cat looked to be enjoying the soothing music. Monica hummed from behind the counter, harmonizing with Binks's tune. She was a middle-aged witch with sleek black hair and a twisted tree tattoo on her wrist, marking her for her mentalist magic. Most mentalists had telekinesis, but Monica's powers were different. She could influence a person's emotions through music. It was probably why I felt so relaxed when I walked in. All kinds of musical instruments lined the walls. A display case housed wands with music notes and lyrics engraved onto their handles. Miles went over to a table with potion samples set out. He drank one of them, and his voice dropped super low.
This is crazy,
he said in a deep bass that didn't sound like him at all. I have to try that! Amy took a swig of potion, then let out a beautiful soprano note. I snickered. They're for opera practice. Really? Her eyes lit up and she cleared her throat. She began belting out a high-pitched melody. It sounded like she truly belonged on stage. My favorite part of the shop had to be the singing spellbooks. Mandy pulled one off the shelf and opened it, and the sound of a choir filled the room. Some witches, like me, used music to focus our magic. I found spells easier to cast if I could sing them. The singing spellbooks contained some of the best spells and the most beautiful melodies. Hey, Talia, Grant said. My heart beat wildly. Goddess, is this it? Is he finally going to ask me out? Heat flared across my skin when I thought about it, but when I turned to Grant, I saw that he was gesturing me over to the baby grand piano in the corner. Okay, so he wasn't going to ask me out. Damn. Maybe I should ask him, I thought. And I totally would, except I chickened out every time I tried. All I could manage to squeak out today was, "Yeah?" Grant sat on the bench and plucked a few keys on the piano.
Think I could learn piano for the talent show?
He played a few notes together, but they totally clashed. I cringed. I don't think there's enough time. Maybe next year. Grant stuck out his bottom lip and looked up at me with those puppy dog eyes. I swore my heart melted every time he looked at me. I laughed to keep myself from blushing. "Stop it," I teased as I nudged him. "I'm not going to mentor you." I'd been playing piano since I was a kid. I'd do anything to help Grant, but teaching him piano in a few short weeks would be nothing short of a miracle. He fluttered his eyelashes. I knew he was just playing around, but I swore my heart skipped a few beats.
I could play piano,
he said, while continuing to play a horrible tune, if you could call it a tune.
I just need a really good teacher.
His gaze dropped to the spot beside him on the piano bench. I sighed and sat. We were so close that our arms nearly touched. I couldn't look him in the eye, so I started moving my fingers over the keys instead. "If you really want to learn, I could teach you. But do you know anything about music?"
"I know there's notes and stuff,"
he said. I laughed and rolled my eyes. "You're kidding." He nudged me with his elbow, and the breath left my chest.
"Of course I'm teasing, Tell. I mean, I am the Phantom of the Opera."
I dared to steal a glance at him, and I was suddenly reminded how attractive he was. It didn't matter that he wore a Phantom of the Opera mask across half his face. It was kind of sexy, to be honest. Call me Christine, because he was definitely my phantom. "We'll figure out something for the talent show," I promised him. "But let's not rush the piano lessons." "Hey, Talia!" Amy called to me from across the room. She stood in front of the display with all sorts of antique musical instruments. "Have you seen this?" I stood from the piano bench and went over to her. Grant followed. "You're asking me if I've seen the musical antiques display?" I teased Amy. "I check it out every time I come in." If there was anything I loved as much as music, it was antiques. I'd started collecting them ever since I'd received my psychic powers. It was so much fun to explore the visions of old antiques, but some were happier than others. Last semester, I went searching for cursed objects for my friend Nadine to help her hone her powers. Some of the objects I'd found were not to be messed with. Everything here seemed safe, though. I ran my fingers over an old alto saxophone, and the most beautiful jazz tune filled my ears. No one else could hear it. It was a vision, a memory attached to the instrument. An image of an old man flashed through my mind. He stood on a stage with his eyes closed, moving his fingers across the pads like the tune came straight from his soul. He looked so happy and into it. Joy swelled within my chest as I listened to him.
"You saw something?"
Grant guessed. "It was really happy," I said. "The owner was really good. He loved to perform." Mandy snuck up behind me. "What about this one?" She pointed to an old record player, and I went over to it. Then I placed my hand on it. An image instantly formed in my mind. I saw an old couple sitting in a living room. The woman laughed while the man made cat skeletons dance to the music in a coordinated rhythm. I smiled as the vision faded. It belonged to a necromancer. He used to put on shows for his wife with cat skeletons. "What about this?" Amy held up a silver music box with a design of roses and leaves all over it. She opened the top, and a beautiful tune began to play. It should have soothed me. It was the kind of music that would put a child to sleep at night, but there was something about those notes that put me on edge. I cringed. Amy's features fell. "You had a vision already? But you didn't touch it." I shook my head. It wasn't a vision. It was a feeling of some sort. I can't explain it. Let me see. The second I took the music box from her, my head began to spin. The room around me vanished, and I had to steady myself against a nearby display table. I was certain I felt Grant's hands on me, trying to keep me upright, but I couldn't focus on his touch. I saw dancing. I heard laughter, but I couldn't place how many people were in my vision. All I saw were flashes of feet and a twirl of skirts. I wanted to join them and dance the night away. Then the screams started. I gasped for breath as my vision cleared. Without thinking, I shoved the music box into Grant's hands.
Tal, you okay?
He asked, sounding concerned. I straightened. Yeah, that was intense. I couldn't make sense of it. Good or bad? Amy asked. I furrowed my brow. Both? It was really happy at first. Then I just heard screaming. Amy looked uncertain. Maybe we should leave that one alone. No, I answered instantly, though I didn't know why. I liked to collect antiques with happy memories. This one was weird, to say the least. It intrigued me as much as it frightened me. I couldn't explain why, but I had to have it. I took it back from Grant. Thankfully, the visions wouldn't return unless I concentrated hard. Maybe if I work with it, I can make sense of the visions and clear the box of its bad memories. Can you do that? Amy asked. I shrugged, turning the music box over in my hands. I won't know unless I try, right? There's a lot of good here, underneath the bad. I want to uncover it. Then you should get it, Mandy suggested. I held the music box close to my chest. I will. I walked to the counter, where Monica was helping another patron check out. Talia, it's great to see you, she said when I reached the front of the line. Monica eyed the music box with a smile. I see you found my latest antique. What do you think? Any visions? They're confusing, I admitted. I'd expect so, she said while she rang up my total. I found this at an estate sale. Rumor has it, the box once belonged to Leroy Pinewood. My jaw dropped. You mean the guy who went crazy and murdered all those people at Pinewood Manor 40 years ago? I shivered. I'd been to the manor before, and there was no place creepier in all the coven. I never wanted to go back. The rest of the coven must have agreed with me because no one went near that haunted place. I can't be sure if the rumors are true. Monica lowered her voice, like this story was a secret. Legend says the music box was there that night, and it's haunted with the spirits of those who died. Grant came up beside me.
If that were true, then who's haunting the manor? Monica's just trying to scare us because it's Halloween.
Well, it's working, I joked. Do you want me to buy this or not? Monica chuckled. It's all yours. She placed the music box in a bag for me and read off my total.
I've got you covered,
Grant offered, sliding a few bills across the counter. You don't have to, really, I protested. He shrugged.
Don't worry about it.
Grant wouldn't take no for an answer. Monica smirked as we argued about it. She took his money and handed me my receipt before I convinced Grant to let me pay. I wasn't sure how to feel about the box as we left the shop, my cat following close at my heels. I didn't think I wanted to uncover any visions of the Pinewood Manor, but I sensed the music box wanted its happy memories restored. It was such a beautiful item that I felt it deserved to be cleansed of any negative energy. Where to next? Mandy asked.
The candy store,
Grant said immediately, already eyeing the store a few shops down.
With what money?
Miles joked.
You'd buy up the whole candy store if you could. You're going to end up in a diabetic coma by the end of the night.
Grant checked his wallet. He only had a few dollars left.
Damn it.
Miles smirked.
Tell you what, I'll pay for your candy haul if you face a ghost.
Grant's features paled, and he glanced around. Ghost? Is there one here now? No, but I bet there's one in there. Miles pointed to the creepy abandoned wand shop next door. I felt uneasy just looking at it. Which is exactly why we should steer clear, Grant said, his voice shaking. Miles crossed his arms. I thought you weren't scared of ghosts. Grant hesitated. I'm not. Then you won't mind going inside, Miles pressed. He was stubborn. He'd do anything to prove that his brother was just as scared of haunted houses as he was. That's breaking and entering, I pointed out. We're not breaking anything, Miles insisted. How long has this place been abandoned? As long as I can remember, I said. There's no way it's still got magical wards on it, Miles theorized. We should be able to get inside, no problem. Exactly, Grant emphasized. And yet, no one dares to go in there. There has to be a reason for it. If the stories are true, we should leave, I added. Miles was just having fun tormenting his brother, but the last thing I wanted was to see Grant step inside mystic wands. It was nothing but bad news. Miles eyed me. What are the stories? Amy spoke carefully, like using the wrong words might summon a spirit.
The shopkeeper died inside long before we were even born. Legend says there's still a noose hanging in the back from where he was hung. No one's reopened the shop because he's still bitter about it. He scares away anyone who enters.
Miles smiled proudly. Then it's the perfect haunted house. Technically, not a house, Mandy snickered. Miles turned to his brother. You said you weren't afraid of ghosts. Now's your chance to prove it. All you have to do is walk inside. Grant turned to his statue. He obviously didn't want to go inside, but he looked to be contemplating the challenge.
You don't have to do this,
I told him. Grant scowled. Miles will torment me about it for ages. I'm the older brother. I'm supposed to torment him.
Who cares? I said. He's your brother. Screw him. No offense, Miles.
None taken, he replied, though he continued smirking at his brother. He knew if Grant didn't do it, he won. Come on, Grant. I know you want that caramel. Think about all the gummy bears and chocolate you could buy if you won that bet. Grant frowned. That might have worked on me when I was a kid. Not anymore. Are you saying you're going to prove me right? Miles challenged. He leaned over and whispered something in Grant's ear, though I didn't hear it. Whatever it was must have convinced him, because Grant stood a little taller. He straightened his costume vest. You're wrong if you think you can intimidate me. I'm not scared of ghosts. We'll see who's braver. Grant held his head high and approached the door. My stomach twisted into knots. We were crowded close enough to the shop that the rest of us concealed Grant. No one can see him from the street. But I wasn't worried about getting in trouble. I feared we were walking into it. Grant, really, I insisted. You don't have to. Miles is just being a jerk. Excuse me? Miles protested. I am a sweetheart. It's okay, Tal, Grant said. I've got this. He curled his fingers around the door handle and muttered an incantation. Green magic swirled out of his hands and the lock disengaged. I held my breath as he stepped inside the shop. The second he disappeared into the dark room, the door slammed shut behind him of its own accord. My heart lurched. Grant! I raced forward and turned the handle, but the door was locked. Visions passed through my mind so quickly that I couldn't make sense of them. Screaming voices layered on top of one another, and I saw visions of shadows moving through the dark room. A chill crept down my spine, and fear curled around me. Then Grant's scream tore through my vision. I wasn't sure if it was real or not, but I knew I had to get to him. "Miles, you jerk!" I yelled. "Chill, Talia," he insisted. "Grant's just playing with me. It's what we do." He hadn't heard the scream, I realized. Gus yowled loudly, sounding concerned for Grant. I jimmied the handle harder and shoved my shoulder against the door. "No, something's seriously wrong. I can feel—" The door flung open. I went flying into the room so fast that I lost my footing. I tripped and dropped my shopping bag in the process. My hands slapped onto worn wood flooring, and the music box thudded against the ground. It fell out of the bag and rolled across the floor. Gus meowed loudly from outside, but it was cut off by a loud bang. The door slammed shut behind me. Everything happened so fast. 1 second I was wrenching on the door handle from outside, and the next I was on the floor, trapped inside the shop. My arms trembled as I pushed myself upright. It was so dark in here that even the shadows of broken shelves and abandoned merchandise were hard to make out. The windows must have been covered by a dark tent so people couldn't see inside, because barely any sunlight came through. A cool breeze drifted through the shop, and the hair on the back of my neck stood. I lifted my gaze, and my pulse came to an immediate halt. A ghostly figure hovered in front of me. There was no color to his form, and I could see straight through him. He was merely a foggy imprint, a memory of the man he used to be. His toes hung inches off the ground, and his head twisted at an odd angle. Angry eyes pierced into me. My pulse quickened and I scurried backwards. Ghosts were common, but only certain witches could see them. The fact that I could see him at all indicated a far worse haunting than I could imagine. This ghost was pissed, and Grant and I had just disturbed him.
Leave!
The ghost yelled at me. "Please don't hurt me," I begged.
Demon scum!
He growled.
Leave this place, or die!
Chapter 2. Grant. Miles thought he was so tough, being able to see ghosts and all. I bet he believed I'd never faced anything scary as an alchemist. I tell you, brewing potions wasn't exactly easy. He'd never faced a monster from hell, now had he? Nah, if I could face a slua, a malicious spirit that comes for your soul, then I could face a haunted shop. He never believed I'd encountered such a monster at Pinewood Manor. He thought I was a coward, but I'd prove him wrong. This shop wasn't scary anyhow. There wasn't anything here. I kicked an old wand out of the way as I walked toward the back of the shop, where Amy said I'd find the noose. I'd take a photo, just to show my brother I had nothing to fear. Miles was just trying to scare me. He said he was trying to help me impress Talia, but I knew my brother. He was trying to prove he was better than me. I'd grown out of the competition stage long ago with this kid, but I mean, what if I did impress Talia? I'd been wanting to ask her out for ages, but that jerk ex-boyfriend of hers swooped in before I could. Now that they'd broken up, I finally had a chance to ask her out. But I hadn't. Yet. I still felt like I'd missed my chance. Talia had never indicated that she liked me. I couldn't be that asshole, and I didn't want to ruin our friendship. She probably wasn't looking for a relationship anyway, not after the way he treated her. Ew. Just thinking about Cody made me want to hurl. Talia deserved better. I picked up one of the wands scattered around the room and spun it around in my hands. I felt nothing. I bet this shop wasn't even haunted. No one had bought this place because they didn't want to clean up the mess. There were water stains on the ceiling, and half the drywall was cracked. It was a fixer-upper for sure. I tossed the wand aside and stepped into the back room. It was even darker here than out in the main shop. I conjured a witch light and tossed it into the air, The tiny ball of light hovered there, illuminating the room. It was nothing but an old storage room, with empty boxes teetering on tall shelves. There wasn't a noose, and there certainly wasn't a ghost. At least, that's what I told myself. The shiver creeping down my spine suggested otherwise. Oh, fuck. Why'd I agree to this? I was getting out of here. I turned around. Empty boxes jumped from the shelves, tumbling down on me. My heart leapt to my throat, and I let out a high-pitched scream. The ghost had found me! The boxes clattered to the ground, and silence filled the room. Only then did I realize that I'd hit the stack with my elbow. Goddess, what was wrong with me? There wasn't a ghost. The sound of the front door bursting open startled me. My pulse quickened, and I raced toward the door to escape the back room. I tripped on the boxes and fell flat on my face. "Please don't hurt me," I heard Talia say. I scrambled to my feet as her scream filled the shop. When I entered the main room, my heart stalled. Talia curled in a ball near the doorway, and a ghostly figure hovered above her, advancing. She trembled in fear. Hell no. This ghost wasn't going anywhere near my girl. I mean, my friend. Oh, fuck it. Hey, ghost! I shouted. The ghost twisted his head in my direction, but his body faced Talia. It was eerie and inhuman, the way his neck swiveled all the way around. Miles was right. I was terrified of ghosts, but I wasn't about to let my fear get the better of me. I conjured a bundle of herbs and salt. As an alchemist, I always had herbs available at a moment's notice. I stared down the ghost, and my voice came out surprisingly strong. "You want to mess with someone? Come and get me!" The ghost's head didn't move an inch, but his body turned in my direction. It freaked me the fuck out. My whole body trembled as I began pouring a bag of salt into my hand. I had to get the mixture just right to ward him off. I took a step back, and a wand snapped under my weight. I tossed oregano into my hand next. Fear shook me as the ghost approached, but I barely acknowledged it. Defending Talia was more important than anything, and my urge to protect her against this ghost was stronger than any haunting could ever be. "Come on, you fucker!" I cried. "Come and get me!" The ghost's lips curled into a sneer as he advanced on me.
"You demons have tainted this town. You will die by my hand."
The ghost lifted his palms like he was about to perform a spell. My whole body trembled as I took several more steps backward. I was running out of time. I emptied the last bag into my palm, which had been filled with lavender. I curled my fingers around the herb mixture. Magic swelled through me, and I infused it into the herbs. "Grant!" Talia cried. Her voice lifted my heart, but it immediately fell in my chest when the ghost charged forward. He swept toward me so fast that if I blinked, I'd miss him. I tossed the herb mixture into the air, and they rained down on him, passing straight through his form. He came to an abrupt halt, and his scream filled the shop, sounding as if he was in pain. Light emitted from his form in each spot the herbs had touched him. It looked like tiny little stars erupting from his form. He burst into a puff of smoke, and the screams ceased instantly. The ghost had vanished. My pulse slowed, and I turned my gaze back to Talia. She trembled from the other side of the shop. "Tal, you okay?" I asked breathlessly as I raced over to her. I helped her to her feet, but she couldn't take her eyes off where the ghost had been. The way she clung to me made me forget about the ghost for a second. She smelled of daisies. All I wanted to do was hold her and never let her go. I think I'll be okay, she said. Is he gone? I swallowed the lump in my throat. For now, I think. Let's get out of here before he can come back, she said in a rush. Agreed. I grabbed her bag, but the second I touched her music box, Talia shook me. Grant! She cried in terror. My whole body stilled. The ghost materialized in front of us, and he looked angrier than ever.
Return to hell!
He screamed. He had to be confused, like many ghosts were, because it made no sense. He lunged, his hand aimed straight at Talia's throat. I did the first thing I could think to do. I jumped in front of Talia and chucked the music box at him. Who was afraid of ghosts now? The top of the music box opened mid-flight, and a tune filled the room. The box passed straight through the apparition, then landed with a loud clunk. The ghost stopped inches from my face, as if someone had hit pause on a remote. Horror filled his eyes for a moment, before an invisible force yanked him backward.
No!
The ghost screamed, his voice echoing throughout the shop. His form began to swirl like water going down a drain. The music box was sucking him up and trapping him inside. My jaw dropped as the ghost's essence was dragged into the box, bit by bit. All at once, he was gone. The top of the music box snapped shut, and the music died instantly. Eerie silence filled the room. Talia trembled as she took a step forward. She wore a curious look as she reached for the music box. I grabbed her hand to stop her. Don't touch it. It could set him free. But how did that happen? She asked. I've never heard of an object that could trap ghosts inside. Well, this one did. We saw it with our own eyes. Yeah, and now I'm super curious, Talia said. I need to know. She grabbed the music box, and I held my breath. She turned it over in her hands, her brow furrowed. That's really strange. What is? I asked cautiously. My visions are gone, she said, reaching for the top. Don't open it, I protested. But Talia had already opened it. I braced myself for the worst, but nothing happened. The music didn't even play. Is it broken? I asked. It must be. The ghost must have ruined it. She grabbed the bag and placed the music box inside. We're not taking that with us, I balked. It's possessed. It doesn't feel possessed, she stated. We saw the ghost vanish inside of it. You said your visions are gone, I pointed out. Maybe the ghost is blocking them. Something happened, but I'm not sure what. She sounded more curious than anything. If this box can trap ghosts, it's worth something. I'm not leaving it here. I eyed it warily. If you think it's safe. She was a seer. She could sense these things. I had to trust her. I don't think it can hurt us, she assured me. Come on, let's leave. I couldn't get out of that place soon enough. Our friends stood outside, looking worried. Talia's cat yowled loudly, but he perked up when he saw her. See? Miles said to Amy and Mandy. I told you they were fine. I crossed my arms. We saw the ghost. Pay up. Miles laughed. No, you didn't. You'd be pissing your pants if you did. Talia shot me a wary glance. We did see the ghost. His head was twisted around and everything. It was really creepy. Did you really see him? Amy's voice shook. Mandy looked skeptical. They're trying to scare us. I'm serious, I insisted. You saw the noose? Miles challenged. Well, no, I admitted. There wasn't a noose, but I did a spell to get rid of the ghost, and Talia's music box absorbed him or something. Amy frowned. Okay, nice story, but Talia's box can't do that. It can, and it did, Talia replied. She pulled the box out of her bag and opened it up. See? It's not even playing music anymore. You must have tripped and broke it, Miles said. But Grant did take my dare, so I guess he gets those treats at the candy shop. Let's go. My jaw dropped as my friends started down the sidewalk. They honestly didn't believe us. I turned to Talia. Are they serious right now? Talia scowled. They're afraid to believe it. But we don't have to convince them. We know what we saw. So, you want to keep it our little secret? I asked. Well, who's going to believe us anyway? She replied. If they won't believe us, no one will. I guess you're right, I agreed. It'll be our story, our secret. I liked the idea of having secrets with Talia. It made me feel closer to her somehow. She smiled. Yeah, ours. Just be careful with that music box, okay? I added. I don't trust it. She held it close to her chest. No, she whispered in a soft voice. I don't either. But I don't think this music box came to me by accident. There's something about it, and it might prove useful. Talia could be right. That music box was unique, but it could be dangerous too. One thing was for sure. This was definitely a Halloween I'd never forget.
This concludes The Music Box. Read more about Talia and Grant in the College of Witchcraft series. Continue listening to enjoy another Hidden Legend short story.
The Midnight Breakout. Prison for Supernatural Offenders short story. Written by Megan Linski and Alicia Radis. Narrated by Maria Posey and Jonathan M. Matthews. Chapter 1. Kalina. If I didn't get out of here, I was certainly going to die. Come on, I growled. Fucking open. I crouched by the lock on my cell door. It was more or less like a dorm room, with a singular bunk bed, a dresser, and a desk. I purposefully hadn't decorated, because I hadn't planned on being here long. A couple of my things were scattered around, but I ignored them. I had to leave them behind if I was going to get out of here. I hadn't yet received a roommate assignment, for which I was thankful. Didn't want anyone snitching that I was trying to break out. I tried the door again, but the lock stubbornly remained in place. Faye specialized in illusion magic, which was my only way out of here. I had to put my intention on the lock itself for it to unlock. I'd never tried this before, so I didn't know if it would work. Focus, Kalina. I closed my eyes and took a few deep breaths, pressing my magical influence upon the lock. I'd been at a magical academy for sorceresses for 1 year before I'd been sentenced to this hellhole. I'd picked up a few tricks before I was imprisoned. This one had to work. When my magic failed to do its job, I growled. I shouldn't have been too hard on myself. I was still in college. Most sorceresses weren't accomplished until they were much older. But I had to get out of here now. I couldn't sit around and wait to grow my powers when I had a target on my back. I took a hairpin out of my pocket. Fine, I'm doing this the old-fashioned way. Inmates weren't allowed to have such things, but I'd paid off a girl in the yard earlier, giving her a couple of things from my commissary in exchange for the pin she'd smuggled in. I inserted it, picking the hairpin around in search of the tumbler. My dad had taught me how to pick locks. I was a pro at it, but this was the most complicated lock I'd ever worked on. It was enchanted with magical power, as well as being the bitchiest deadbolt I'd ever had the misfortune to know. I forced my magic to push back the enchantment holding the lock in place so I could work the mechanism inside the door. Finally, I moved the hairpin the right way and heard the lock click. Elation spread across my chest. Finally. The cell door unlocked. I was free, but getting out of my cell was only the first step. Next, I needed to break out of this prison. I'd abandoned the mandatory uniform in my cell and slipped on a pair of black jeans and a long-sleeve black shirt. Not my usual outfit, but it'd have to do. I tied my blonde hair back before I carefully slipped out into the hallway. It was dark and quiet. Students, or rather, inmates, were forced to comply to a curfew of 10 o'clock every night and locked into their cells until 6 the next morning. If I got caught sneaking around the halls, I'd be disciplined, or worse, put into solitary. But I'd only ever gotten caught once. I never intended to get caught again. I clung to the shadows and made sure to keep my eyes wide open. As I walked, I couldn't help but survey and appreciate the architecture that made up the prison. Dark Institute for Supernatural Offenders was built on the site of an old cathedral the humans had abandoned long ago, on a place called Dark Island. The humans tried to settle this island over 2 centuries ago, and failed due to how magical the island was. Freaky things happened here. People disappeared without a trace. Weird monsters no one had ever seen ran around and devoured poor souls. The ghosts ran rampant around the island's haunted trees. The humans had gotten spooked and ran off, but us supernaturals saw an opportunity. We'd changed the island into our own personal version of Australia. Long story short, whoever was too evil or too fucked up to remain in their own societies was sent here, to a prison island protected by a magical ward that no one, no matter how powerful, could escape. Years ago, before this place was a school, they kept the worst prisoners in the cathedral, which they'd fashioned into a makeshift prison, and put the rest of the criminals to work, building the town surrounding it, a city called Shade Hills. After they ran out of room for inmates at the old cathedral, they built an asylum beside it, to hold the less mentally stable criminals. Even so, it was a nice asylum. The building was Gothic in style, with long spires, flying buttresses, and stained glass windows set with pictures of vampires, elementals, and other various magical races. The rugs were red, and the ceilings were high. Stone sculptures set into the walls depicted magnificent sculptures of supernatural beings, with gargoyles of magical creatures at their sides. The place was a beautiful mansion, a building so intricate it was difficult not to stop and stare at all the finery. I wasn't fooled. This was just another jail cell. A gilded cage to hold trapped and desperate people. Despite how pretty the windows were, they were still fitted with bars, and there were still guards walking around with guns loaded with noxite, a magical chemical that could rob anyone of their powers for 24 hours if the guards shot. I cringed thinking about all the terrible experiments they used to perform on people here 20 years ago. Most came out crazier than they came in. The United Supernatural Union found out and shut the asylum down, changing it into a university for troubled college kids instead, in a vain attempt to change the island's image. I'd been sentenced to the Institute for high treason against the Crown. My people, the Arcania, Fae and their shifter mates, followed a monarchy that we'd practically worshipped for centuries. I'd tried to overthrow the king, and was unsuccessful. Even worse, I'd gotten caught. My mother had interceded on my behalf against the people crying for my head. She was the only reason I wasn't executed and banished here instead as a punishment. Banishment was a cruel fate for a fae. There was no worse sentence. I would have rather died than lost my honor. I'd been stripped of all titles and sent here in complete shame. The humiliation was almost too much to bear. But I wasn't staying here. I was going to break out of the Institute and get off this island, even if I had to swim back to the mainland. I didn't know how I'd get past the magical barrier quite yet, but I'd figure it out once I got there. I'd have to live a life on the run, but that was better than trying to survive at this joke of a school. I heard screams up ahead. I held my breath and pressed myself to the wall. As footsteps approached, I dared to peek around the corner. A couple of guards were holding on to a student who was screaming wildly. By the flash of his fangs, I knew he was a vampire. The inmate was screaming his bloody head off. He yanked at the guards holding his arms and let out a blood-curdling scream. But his supernatural strength was worthless. The other two guards were also vampires and held him tightly to prevent escape. He wore an orange jumpsuit and had Noxite cuffs around his ankles and wrists. Students were only fitted with jumpsuits if they went to Cell Block 9. It was not a place anyone wanted to go. The vampire screamed again. He dove his fangs toward a guard's neck in a vain attempt to escape. But the second guard brought out a syringe that was filled with who knew what. He sank it into the vampire's arm, and the inmate slumped, unconscious. The guards dragged him to a padlocked doorway at the end of the hall. The one guard opened the door, and they pulled the inmate down the steps into the dark belly of the school below. I shivered as the door shut behind them, a cool breeze passing over my skin like crawling bugs. Cell Block 9 looked nothing like the rest of the Institute. It was in the basement of the school, dark and foreboding. The cells were truly cells, not modified dorms, and food and water were hard to come by. Some students were put into special reform programs that more or less resulted in driving them insane. It was a place reserved for the worst of the worst in the supernatural prison system. Murderers, rapists, and serial killers. More people died down there than came out. If the guards didn't torture you to death, the other inmates would. It was where the warden sentenced people who'd been bad enough to go into solitary. Whatever that vampire had done to get tossed down there, it couldn't have been worth it. Cell Block 9 was the definition of hell on Earth. I wasn't getting tossed down there. I'd rather die first. I needed to get the hell out of here. There were no cameras stationed around the school. Technology worked shoddy around magic. And there were too many enchantments around the prison to keep students in. They just didn't work properly. The prison counted on guard patrols to stop breakouts, but I'd stolen the night schedule off a guard while he'd been preoccupied dealing with a fight in the prison library. I'd studied it for days until I memorized the patrol routes by heart. If I took the northwest corridor, I'd go unseen. I had the thought I'd move faster on 4 legs rather than 2. I concentrated. My form shifted, silver hair growing over my body as my blue eyes became canine. I grew a long tail and pointed ears. My height grew, and hands became paws. I'd successfully transformed from a young woman into a very powerful wolf. This form would be easy to spot. I was almost 6 feet tall in this form, but I could move much quicker. As I caught a glimpse of myself in the ornate mirror across the hall, I sneered, and my lip rose bitterly. I was the only female fae, the only sorceress, who could change into a shifter form. The power to become an animal was reserved for the males of our society. No female fae had ever mastered the powers of shifting. Yet here I was, transforming into a wolf with ease. That was the real reason I'd been sentenced here. I was an abnormality in my society, a freak, like all Institute kids were. I shouldn't exist. I was unnatural. That's why they'd gotten rid of me. I perked up my ears. My superb hearing and excellent sense of smell didn't catch anything. There was no one around. Time to book it. I took a few deep breaths as I ran down the hall. I only had to get outside and past the guards. Once there, I could slip through the yard, avoid the spotlights, climb over the enchanted wall, and hopefully slip past the barbed wire, where I could slip into the woods and be home free. I made it through the northwest corridor without incident. It was almost too easy. Then I saw 2 guards posted by the door leading to the outside yard. I changed back to my human form, pressing against a statue. The guards hadn't noticed me, but I wasn't getting out of here unless I got past them. I focused my magic ahead. The guards clutched at their necks. They gasped for breath, choking on the air until their eyes rolled back into their heads, and they went down. I tiptoed around them carefully. It was just an illusion. I hadn't really made them suffocate, just made them think they were. They'd passed out of fright. They'd wake up soon, so I needed to move. I ran outside. My heart leapt into my throat as I turned the corner and saw that, fuck, there were patrols everywhere outside, circling the yard. The spotlight shone brightly over the landscape, scanning the area. I didn't think I could escape that way. A strange hissing sound from around the corner caught my attention. What was that? I changed back into my wolven form and growled. Someone was nearby. As I crouched, disbelief ran through my form as I saw just who it was. Marcus. He was one of my fellow inmates here at the Institute, my age. Marcus was tall, with a muscular build. He had tan skin and wavy dark hair that was wild and fell in waves around his chin. A thin scruff peppered his chin, and he had these eyes, these incredibly dark eyes that just sucked you in and made a girl's legs go weak. There seemed to be so many stories in those sad, dark eyes of his. Marcus was a warlock from the Miriamic Coven. Fae hated warlocks and witches. Absolutely fucking despised them. But by gods, he was cute. And I kinda hated myself for thinking that. The Miriamic Coven and the Arcania had been at war for centuries. As a rule, witches and fae didn't like each other. So why did my heart speed up every time I looked at Marcus? His back was to me. He'd abandoned his school uniform and was out here in ripped and baggy jeans, a leather jacket covered in spray paint. He held a can of spray paint and was finishing up graffiti that he'd painted onto one of the prison walls. Other cans littered the area around his shoes. Just where had he gotten those? Spray paint was contraband. Marcus was painting the image of a doorway. The door was beautiful. It was open, leading to a valley with gorgeous mountains and beautiful hills. The flowers bloomed, the sunlight beamed, the grass within the painting was dotted with small rabbits, and birds flew through the clear sky. The painting looked so real, I was almost certain I could slip through the door and enter into a new reality. I couldn't deny he was talented. The artwork was beautiful. It seemed a sin to call it graffiti. I thought that Marcus should be at an art school somewhere, instead of in here. Marcus had some crazy story of what he'd been sentenced to the Institute for, but I couldn't remember it, because I hadn't believed it when I'd heard it. I bet he'd made it up. If he was as bad as he said he was, he'd be in cell block 9, not in the general prison population like the rest of us. There was a tomcat sitting at his ankles, watching him paint. Witches and their damn cats. They couldn't last a second without them. I think Marcus had snuck this one in. Marcus paused. He sensed someone was behind him. He turned around slowly and spoke in a deep, threatening voice. "Whoever you are, I'm armed." He held up the can of paint threateningly. I changed back into a woman and had to try not to roll my eyes. He had magic, the dumbass. Why didn't he use it? I tried to creep around him. I didn't want Marcus knowing what I was up to, but he saw me in the shadows and threw the can of spray paint. It hit its target, clunking against my head. I let out a gasp. Ow! Damn it, Marcus! I shouted. I rubbed my head. Marcus's eyes narrowed. He took a step closer. Kalina? Yes, it's me. I was forming a bruise. He turned red. Fuck, Kalina. I'm so sorry. Then a second later, he straightened up and said, why didn't you get out of the way? His fake tough guy act was lame. I wasn't buying it. Never mind. Just forget you saw me, I snapped. I was in a hurry. I had no time for this. Marcus got a curious look on his face. What are you doing out of your cell? I had to redirect the question. What are you doing? He shrugged. Mostly just painting. The guard who works my cell block is kind of an idiot. He always leaves my door unlocked. I slip out from time to tag buildings. He gestured to the painting behind him. My tone was flat. So instead of trying to escape, you come out here to fuck around. Well, yeah, he scoffed. Not like I'm getting out of here anyway. It's impossible. Maybe for him, but I wasn't giving up. Seems like a weird use of your freedom, coming out here to tag walls. It's not a want. I need to paint, Marcus said bluntly. I'll go crazy if I can't get these images out of my head. Well, if you went crazy, you'd join the club. Everyone's nuts in here, I grumbled. The school will have covered it up in the morning. Marcus kicked a can of spray paint aside. I stared. So why did you do it? Marcus shrugged. Just because something won't last doesn't mean it's not worth pursuing. There were so many secrets in that statement. When I said nothing more, Marcus asked, You didn't answer my question. What are you doing out here? It's none of your concern, I responded. Marcus scowled. If I'm caught out here with you, we're both dead meat, so you should probably fill me in. I sighed. He was right. I've caught the attention of the prison gang. There are too many for me to fight off by myself. I stick around, I'm dead, I told him. Maybe if you weren't such a loner, you wouldn't need to run, Marcus responded. That's rich of you to say. You're a loner. Marcus shrugged. You have to make them fear you. It's the only way to survive in here. I snorted. Marcus might scare other people, but he certainly didn't scare me. I don't need friends. I work alone. I threw my shoulders back. So I'm escaping the Institute. Tonight. Are you crazy? Marcus hissed. His eyes bulged out of his head. No one's ever done that. Well, I'm going to be the first, I told him. And I don't have time to sit around and chat, so it'd be best if you got out of my way. Marcus paused for a few moments. Take me with you, he began. No, I growled. I want to get out of here just as badly as you do. We can escape together, he said. I told you, I work alone. I don't need any help. Marcus gave me a hard look. I'm no snitch, but I'm not staying here. If you leave me behind, I'll scream, and we'll both get caught. My eyes narrowed. You wouldn't dare. Marcus took a deep breath. I dove forward and slapped my hand over his mouth to silence him. He let out a tiny yelp. Okay, fine. I slowly took my hand away from his mouth. Let's just go already. Marcus grinned widely. He went to follow me, his cat trailing behind us. He tripped over his own spray paint bottles as we left, which made me cringe. His clumsy ass was going to get us caught. I was going to go through the yard, but I think I have another way, I said slowly, an idea forming in my mind. What are you suggesting? Marcus hushed as we rounded the corner. I checked for guards, then ran forward when it was free and clear. There's a lake on the prison campus. It's where they keep the sirens, I said. I think there's gotta be an exit around there somewhere. So we swim through the lake and come out on the other side? Marcus's voice was apprehensive. What's the problem? I growled, already annoyed. Marcus hesitated before he admitted reluctantly. I don't swim very well. I sighed. What do you do well, Marcus? Art, he responded. I sighed. I shivered. Marcus noticed and slipped off his leather jacket, placing it over my shoulders. Here, it's cold tonight. I couldn't help but smile, just a little. Marcus's jacket was warm, and it smelled like him. As my traitorous eyes wandered up his muscular form, I caught sight of something unique. Marcus had this beautiful tattoo lacing up his left arm. It was the tattoo of a cat, symbols of his coven laced over his skin. Witch symbols, like a cauldron, an eye, and others. The tattoo was very colorful and done in the same graffiti style he used to paint with. I didn't know what the tattoo meant, but it seemed too personal to ask about, so I didn't. Marcus really was gorgeous, and he totally knew I was checking him out. He wiggled his eyebrows and said, "Want to make a quick pit stop?" I huffed. "In your dreams. Come on, you're an inmate. You can't sink any lower," Marcus teased. "Nothing's off limits. Fae have rules about this sort of thing. I don't want to talk about it. I was supposed to find my fated mate one day, and I was determined that Marcus was not him. Mostly because I was afraid of what would happen if he was. I couldn't do anything to ruin my reputation more. If the people back home found out I had a crush on a warlock, it'd be considered betraying my race. He was wrong when he said I couldn't sink any lower. I still had my dignity. I couldn't ruin that for a chance to be happy, even with Marcus. He noticed what I was thinking, and his grin fell away. I was just joking. I scoffed. "Think I'm ugly or something?" "No," he replied quietly. "The last relationship I had, it didn't end well." His tone was clearly stricken with grief. He still sounded heartbroken. "I'm sorry." "Don't be," he said, but his tone was choked. "It's my fault anyway." I sensed something horrible had happened. Every inmate at the Institute had a sad story. This was his. "You want to talk about it?" I don't know why I was asking. We didn't have a lot of time, but this seemed like something Marcus needed to get off his chest. Marcus hesitated, then shook his head. "No, it was a long time ago." We didn't talk further about it. My insides squirmed when I saw the lake just ahead. It wasn't swarmed with guards. We had a clear and easy walk to the beach from here. "There's the lake," I whispered. "Let's go." We strode toward the lake. It was still on the inside of the prison yard and had a small sandy beach surrounding it. The sirens within the lake had a tunnel underground that connected to the prison. The lake itself wasn't very big, mostly there to contain those who'd been sentenced, who couldn't physically live without water. It was at least 40 feet away from the prison boundary wall and surrounded by trees that were within the prison yard. Marcus and I came to the edge of the beach. The cat's fur bristled as it looked down at the water. Marcus looked at me and asked, "Now what?" I smiled slightly. "Now we bid adieu. Goodbye, Marcus." "Goodbye?" Marcus's words were cut off as a scaly, green hand shot out from the water, wrapped around his ankle, and dragged him to the depths of the lake below.
Chapter 2. Marcus. There was something about Kalina I couldn't put my finger on. Usually I put on my perfected death glare and everyone left me alone. With Kalina, all the walls I put up to fake my way through the Institute cracked. No matter how hard I tried to repair them, the real me started pushing through. When that siren grabbed hold of my ankle and dragged me into the icy waters, the real me burst through my mental walls like the fucking Hulk. I turned into a total wuss. I let out a high-pitched scream, but it barely lasted a second before my voice was silenced by the water. My body was dragged beneath the surface. Cold water filled my mouth, and my nostrils burned at the sudden assault. My hands flung upward, reaching desperately to grab onto something. Anything. A tight hand gripped around my ankle, but I couldn't see the creature through the dark, murky water. "Yoctus!" I tried to scream the only defense spell I knew, but I choked on my words. It wasn't like it would work anyway. I'd never mastered that spell before I left Miriam College of Witchcraft. Pressure built in my ears, and I knew that was a sign that I didn't have much time. Instead of using magic, I turned to the only thing I actually knew how to use: brute force. I flung my foot outward, and it connected with something hard. I didn't know what it was at first, until the hold on my ankle loosened. Fucking siren bitch! I kicked my feet and stroked my arms through the water. My chest tightened, and I thought I might drown at any moment. Then my head broke the surface, and I gasped for breath. "Kalina!" I cried through the night. My arms flailed in the water as I struggled to stay afloat. I hadn't lied when I said I couldn't swim. My skin crawled at the thought of sirens swarming me from below, waiting to drag me to the depths of their chilly lake for goddess knows what. Eat me, fuck me, or suck my soul out. I wasn't sure. They weren't like the mermaids of Atlantis. They were ruthless, dangerous, and downright evil as far as the stories I'd heard. "Kalina!" I screamed again. Water splashed into my eyes as I flailed. I blinked away the droplets and eyed the shoreline for the Arcania girl. From 20 feet away, I heard my cat Rishi hissing like a maniac, and his black fur stood on end. I saw Kalina nowhere. Shit, she must have been pulled under. Movement down the shoreline caught my eye, and my deep-seated worry for Kalina vanished. It was quickly replaced by the stabbing pain of utter betrayal. She might as well have stabbed a dagger through my back. A white wolf sprinted along the shoreline toward the nearest security fence. The wind rushed through her fur, and her legs moved fast beneath her. She'd totally abandoned me. Stupid shifters. I should have known not to trust her. I'd heard enough stories about the Fae's trickery. But I'd been dumb enough to believe her. She'd purposely brought me here to trick me so she could leave me behind. My heart sank, and I started swimming back to shore. The best I could, anyway. I was surprised when I made it back to dry land. The sirens must have been playing a sick joke and didn't actually want me. For whatever reason. Because no others reached out of the lake to drag me under. I crawled into the grass, sputtering and shivering. Rishi hurried over and rubbed the top of his head against my face. My arms quivered as they tried to hold the rest of me up. Not gonna lie, that was terrifying. I started to tell my cat, but the sound of a loud howl cut through the night. My gaze jerked in the direction of the sound. The moonlight glistened off the tails of 4 sirens as they launched out of the water down the shoreline. They weren't as beautiful as mermaids. They were more fish-like than human. Though their upper half took the shape of a woman, their scales crawled all the way up from their fish tail to cover their torso. Their hands were webbed and scaled, and their necks were covered in gills. Their faces were mostly human, though their bone structure was sharp and their eyes intense. It was a calculated attack. The 4 of them grabbed onto Kalina's white fur and yanked her toward the water. The wound she'd slayed into my heart slammed shut, and I felt a pang hit me for entirely different reasons. I barely saw a flash of the Fae shifter's woven form before she was gone, dragged beneath the surface of the lake, as I had been just moments ago. So the sirens weren't messing around. They'd just been distracted with a new target. I didn't think. I didn't care that Kalina had just abandoned me to drown. All I could do was act. I ran down the shoreline, pumping my arms as fast as I could. Rishi sprinted beside me and came to a skidding halt in the spot where Kalina had vanished. I didn't stop. I jumped into the water, not giving one flying fuck that I couldn't swim. I just knew I had to save her. I tried to dive gracefully, but I more or less belly-flopped in the shallowest part of the lake. My feet found the bottom and I stood. Water splashed around me frantically, and my heart raced. "Kalina!" I screamed as if she might respond. I threw myself farther into the lake, using my arms to pull myself out toward the middle. I was frightened for Kalina, but something about trying to save her calmed me. The water didn't seem so scary when I was playing the hero. I ducked my head underwater and scanned the lake bottom for signs of the Arcania sorceress. The moonlight barely lit the top few feet of the water, but I could see 4 shadows swimming circles below me. They swarmed like sharks awaiting their next meal, but they paid no attention to me. They were focused on the girl they'd already caught. Kalina had shifted back into human form, and her blonde hair billowed around her beautiful face. She floated in the center of the siren circle. 4 of the sirens held on to her limbs, and though she tried to fight back against them, she couldn't break free. I swiped my arms through the water and kicked to try to get to her, but I barely made it a few feet below the surface when something stopped me in my tracks. A beautiful melody filled the waters. It was so mesmerizing, so calming. The same 4 notes played over and over, repeating the incredible melody. There was something magical and enchanting about those 4 wonderful notes. I felt like I could swim across the ocean and back, like the beautiful melody would carry me the whole way. "Come to us," a smooth voice called through the water. I wanted nothing more than to follow its instructions. I started swimming toward the sirens. Though Kalina kept trying to fight them off, I felt totally at ease around them. It was like she thought they were going to hurt her. But how could a creature with such a beautiful song hurt anyone? The lake seemed brighter, as if the sun was coming out. The siren's scales glistened beautiful colors, like rich blues and bright purples. "Come to us," the beautiful voice called again. It floated through the water with the sound of the song seeping into my bones like a ray of sun. My eyes swept over the sirens swimming below. They were so pretty, and their song held a promise that everything would be okay. Part of me knew I shouldn't believe it, but another part of me couldn't deny it. And then my eyes landed on Kalina. Fear filled her eyes, a look I'd only seen one other woman wear before. It was that terror of knowing you were seconds away from death, of realizing there was no turning back. Had I never seen it before, I'd have thought she was playing some sort of game. But even through the darkness of the lake, I could see her fear was genuine. "Marcus," she mouthed. I heard the muffled sound of her voice trying to scream my name, but it was drowned out by the weight of the water. "Help me." Something inside of me snapped, and the songs of the sirens died instantly. The lake dimmed back to its dark murkiness. The spell the sirens had put on me had broken. All 4 of them snapped their ugly heads in my direction, as if they could feel it too. Their beauty had been washed away when the spell ended, and my skin crawled at their intense features. My chest tightened as I began running out of air. I expected the sirens to start swimming toward me now that I caught their attention, but they didn't. Kalina jerked again, and they turned back toward her. Pushing past my racing heart and the weight on my chest, I swam toward them at the bottom of the lake. I reached for the closest siren and yanked her by the hair. "Let her go, you bitch!" She didn't even turn to look at me. She swung her tail through the water and slapped me on the side of the head with so much force it made my vision blur. I went spinning backward through the water. My heart leapt as I tried to control my momentum, but I barely knew which way was up and which way was down. I only became oriented again when I felt my body hit the bottom of the lake. Darkness began to close in around me as I reached my limit without oxygen. All I saw were the sirens surrounding Kalina. The one who'd smacked me with her tail leaned down to Kalina's leg. Fangs grew from her mouth. I had to do something before the sharp teeth could break Kalina's skin. I reached out, desperately grabbing at anything that might save us. My hands curled around a sharp rock. I didn't really understand what I was doing when I took it in my hand and squeezed as tight as I could. The sharp, deep pain sliced across my palm as the rock cut into my skin. Blood began to pour out of the wound, creating a swelling cloud of red liquid around me. 4 pairs of eyes jerked in my direction. The siren's eyes widened, a hungry look in them. All I saw was a flash of fins swimming in my direction before my vision totally faded. I thought if I were to die here at the Institute, it'd be in a prison riot or gang fight. I never thought it'd be at the hands of sirens. Something grabbed onto my shirt, and I thought for sure it was a siren ready to sink her teeth into me. But several moments passed, and instead of the sharp sensation of fangs digging into my skin, I felt my body being pulled through the water. The pressure in my ears eased, and finally, the cold night air touched my skin. I barely knew what the feeling was. I wanted to take a breath, but I couldn't find the strength. My clothes clung to my skin as I was dragged out of the water and onto shore. I briefly heard the sound of a wolf's whimper from above me. Kalina, I thought. Kalina's whimper turned into the sobs of a human girl. Marcus! She cried, but her voice sounded like it was coming from a mile away. Marcus, wake up! A stinging pain shot across my face. Did Kalina just slap me? Marcus! She screamed. I wanted to answer her, but my chest closed up. I couldn't find the air. Gods damn it, she grumbled. I felt her hands on my chest, pumping up and down. I swore I heard the sounds of Rishi wailing, but I couldn't be sure. Wake the fuck up, you idiot! Kalina growled. Then the most amazing thing happened. Kalina leaned over me, and her lips connected with mine. Finally, air entered my lungs. Every nerve ending in my body came alive, and my stomach somersaulted in my abdomen. Kalina's touch was like magic, awakening me to a new life. She was magnificent. I reached up and cradled the back of her neck, drawing her closer to me. Kalina gasped in surprise and parted her lips. Her body relaxed over top of me, and I felt her firm breasts press into my chest. My dick started to harden in my jeans as my tongue slid inside her mouth. I hadn't kissed someone like this in what felt like ages. Not since before I'd been sentenced to the Institute. It felt wrong, but something about it felt so right. Kalina moaned as my hand slid down her back. But it was as if the sound had snapped her back to attention. She jerked away from me, and my eyes sprang open. In the moonlight, I saw the horrified look on her face. Kalina swatted me in the chest. You insolent moron! I wasn't kissing you! I was trying to save your life! I blushed red, and a horrible sense of embarrassment settled deep in my gut. Of course she was doing CPR, duh. But I could have sworn she'd kissed me back. Or had I imagined it? I cleared my throat. Sorry, I didn't mean to. Must be a side effect of the siren song. The pink in her cheeks settled. Yeah, she said quickly. Must be. Dare I say I heard uncertainty in her tone? I sat up, sputtering. Rishi purred at my side and rubbed against me. He was obviously happy to see me safe. I scratched him behind the ears. I shot a quick glance toward the lake, as if I expected the sirens to jump out at us again. But the shoreline was at least 20 feet away. They couldn't get to us from here. Thanks for saving my life, I told Kalina. She took shallow breaths and nudged me in the shoulder. Yeah, well, you saved mine first. I eyed her sideways and smirked. I couldn't just abandon you, even though you abandoned me. Her jaw dropped dramatically. I did not abandon you. I just let you fall in the lake. I frowned skeptically. You abandoned me. She rolled her eyes. Fine, maybe I did. I didn't want you to drown. I just wanted to get rid of you. But what? I pressed. Her breath finally slowed, and she pushed her wet hair out of her face. She spoke like the words were hard to admit. But now that you saved me, I guess I have to take you with me. I owe you a life debt now, Faye's honor and all. Guess so, I smirked. She sighed and stood. Well, come on, we don't have all night. The guards are going to make their rounds any moment. Kalina didn't have a chance to finish her sentence before the sound of shouting cut her off. Hey! A guard screamed. What are you two doing out here? I looked over to see a pair of guards advancing on us. One of them lifted a flashlight and it shined in our eyes. Run! Kalina cried. I'd have frozen up if it was anyone else giving me the instructions. But with Kalina, I had this urge to do anything she said. I scrambled to my feet and sprinted alongside her. I'd barely had a chance to catch my breath from the near drowning, and already I was running for my life. Rishi hissed at the guards, then ran beside us. "Where are we going?" I demanded of Kalina between breaths. She shot a glance over her shoulder at the guards. "Over the fence, you dummy!" "We'll never make it," I argued. "The barbed wire will cut us to shreds." She shot a dark glance at me. "I didn't come all this way not to try." "Stop or we'll shoot," one of the guards threatened. I didn't think he was lying. A high-pitched squeal sounded across the prison yard. An alarm. "Kalina!" I started, but she gasped in pain. We'd just reached the chain-link fence surrounding the prison property, but she went down a second before we got to it. At first I thought she'd tripped, but when I bent down to help her up, her limbs went totally limp. A noxite dart stuck out of her leg. Her eyes rolled back into her skull. The last of the strength she had, she reached out toward the fence. Her fingers just barely grazed the chain link, as if it was the last hope she had left in the world. My heart broke for her. "We said stop!" a guard shouted, a second before he slammed into me. My body flung to the side. Heavy hands landed on my chest and curled into my shirt. The guard shoved me up against the fence, the chain link digging into my back. I threw my hands up in surrender, but my heart pounded in exhilaration. I knew there was no getting out of here, but this night with Kalina was one I wasn't soon to forget. For the first time since being thrown into the Institute, I felt alive. "Watch it, man," I growled. The second guard had jumped on top of Kalina, even though she was weak as hell. The noxite darts they used here were diluted so they wouldn't totally knock us out, just slow us down in case they had to question us. Kalina was conscious enough to know what was going on, but not strong enough to do anything about it. The guard yanked her hands behind her back and secured them with noxite cuffs. My heart leapt. Rishi must have noticed my anxiety because he raced forward and scratched the guard next to me in the ankle. I shoved the guard off, which was a feat of itself because the guy was fucking strong. Heart pounding, I lunged for the second guard. "Get off her!" I tried to shove him, but he was so strong he remained in place. The second guard grabbed my arms and pinned them behind my back. We were totally done for. The other pulled Kalina upright. "On your feet. You two have earned yourselves a night in solitary." To my surprise, Kalina burst into tears. There was no warning at all. "But please, officer," she cried. I didn't mean it." She didn't sound like herself at all. The crying seemed incredibly shallow. When she shot me a subtle glance, I knew why. Kalina was faking it to get us off easy. She knew we weren't getting out of this unless we begged. She's right," I added, playing along. "It was my idea. Don't punish her." "Your idea?" The guard snarled in my ear. "What were you doing, trying to escape?" Tears streamed down Kalina's face. "No, officer, we would never." "Why don't you tell it to the warden?" The guard snarled. My heart dropped. If Kalina weren't crying, I might have hexed her for getting us sent to the warden. The asshole made my blood run cold. There was no freaking mercy with that guy. Prisoners sent in to see him usually didn't come out. The guard grabbed my shoulders firmly, digging his fingers in so tight that I couldn't move if I didn't want a broken arm. Rishi growled at my feet. "Let's go," he demanded. The guards dragged Kalina and me toward the warden's quarters inside the prison. Darkness enveloped us inside as the doors shut behind us, blocking out the moonlight. My heart pounded heavily to the beat of our feet on the polished floor. Kalina shot me a harsh glance, as if to accuse me of something. Just as we turned the first corner, I heard the sound of footsteps. I thought it was another guard, until a small round figure came into view. "Professor Warbright?" I gaped. He was a short, stocky warlock who taught some of my classes. The instruction was supposed to help us learn how to control our powers, but it had been useless as shit for me so far. Professor Warbright carried a stack of papers. He cleared his throat and looked up to me, gaping. "Marcus? What's the meaning of this?" They were caught sneaking around. The guard holding me sneered. We're taking them in. Screw him. The guards thought they were above everyone else here, but most of the adult staff had seniority over them. Professor Warbright looked to me as if awaiting my explanation. We just snuck out to... I stammered. He cocked a dark eyebrow. I had to come up with something fast. To fool around, I answered. Kalina shot me a skeptical look, as if to say, that's the best you could come up with? I shrugged. You know how it is, I said, my voice wavering. We're in class all day, locked up in our rooms all night. A lot of tension builds up. Sometimes you just gotta get some, you know? Kalina rolled her eyes. She wasn't buying my lame story. I didn't know if Professor Warbright would either. But his features softened the more I stammered. Let them go, he told the guards. I'll handle this. The guards didn't budge. We're taking them to the warden. Prison policy, one argued. The warden is busy, Professor Warbright said with a tone of authority. He gestured down to the files in his hands. Why else do you think I'm here in the middle of the night? I'm working overtime to help him catch up. You wouldn't want the warden to hear how you disobeyed a senior staff's orders, would you? The guards exchanged a quick glance. Their eyes widened a little at Professor Warbright's threat. No, sir, the guard answered. They're all yours. The guard let me go, but not without giving my shoulder one final, aggressive squeeze to show who was boss. Don't let us find you out here again, he growled. I stumbled forward, clutching my bruised shoulder. They took off Kalina's cuffs, and she caught herself on the wall. The poor girl was so weak from Noxite she could hardly stand. I rushed forward and grabbed her around the waist to keep her upright. She looked at me like she was about to push me off, before sagging into me. Professor Warbright eyed us, but he didn't say anything until the guards left the hall and were out of earshot. I have to say, Marcus, I'm quite disappointed to see you out of your dorm at this hour. Cell, more like it. I thought you were making progress, he said. I am, I promised. I just thought Kalina could help me. She groaned from beside me like she couldn't deal with how stupid my cover story was. She looked like she was going to say something, but she was so high on tranquilizers she couldn't find the words. That, or she found it amusing to watch me stumble over myself. Professor Warbright frowned. I'm afraid this isn't the path toward rehabilitation, Marcus. I know that now, I added. Please don't take us to see the warden, Professor. It'll set my progress back by at least 3 weeks. Professor Warbright cocked an eyebrow. You should have thought of that before you snuck out. I held my breath, waiting for the solitary confinement sentence. But, Professor Warbright added, I think it's fair with the progress you've been making that I leave you off with a warning. A warning? I gaped. It came out sounding like I was complaining, but I was more than relieved. I'm giving you a chance here, Marcus, Professor Warbright said. Head back to your dorms and I won't say a word to the warden. Holy crap! Had I actually gotten good at magic in the last 2 hours? This was a miracle. Yes, sir, I said quickly. I'm sorry I can't escort you, he added. I'm very busy at the moment. Don't get caught on your way back. And don't let me hear about you sneaking out again. Understand? Yes. I nodded my head firmly, and Kalina nodded beside me. After a beat, Professor Warbright raised his eyebrows. Well, hurry back. Right. I turned away from him, and we hurried off in the other direction, Rishi following behind. Kalina breathed a sigh of relief, though she seemed distressed as we headed back to the dorms. Had she not been so weak under the influence of Noxite, I'd have put my money on her trying to escape again. But she'd never make it with the toxic metal working its way through her system. Thanks for ruining my escape plan, Kalina muttered as we snuck through the halls. It wasn't my fault, you know, I pointed out in a low voice. She rolled her eyes. I thought she was about to say something, but then we heard the sound of footsteps, and she cut off. We ducked down a secluded hallway as the guards passed. I pressed my back against the wall and held her close to me. So close I could feel her heart beating against me, and the warmth of her breath across my neck. My pulse quickened. I shouldn't feel this way about a fey sorceress. We stayed that way a moment longer until the sound of footsteps faded and Kalina cleared her throat. Right. I couldn't hold her like this forever. I supported Kalina and helped her down the dark hallway. She didn't say anything until we reached her dorm. The room was unlocked, and we slipped in quietly. Rishi stood outside to keep watch. I gently laid her on the bed, and she moaned. Her eyes sparkled up at me, but it had to be the light from the moon because the rest of her features suggested she wasn't pleased in the slightest. "Marcus," she said softly. My heart fluttered, and I thought she was about to admit the kiss meant something. "Yeah?" The moment she opened her mouth, she crushed my hopes. "Don't ever try to fuck with me again." I stood there in her room, gaping down at her. "I don't believe you're what they say you are," she claimed. "And I'm the kind of girl who will crush your balls if you get too close." I should have been scared. Girls like Kalina were the worst, the ones who could see right through you, the kind that didn't mess around. But there was a fire in her that I found hellishly irresistible. And there was something about the threat, like she was trying to convince herself of something. I leaned down until I was only inches from her face. The proximity threatened another kiss, and my heart hammered. I could feel her shallow breaths brush across my lips. But instead of going in for the kiss, I leaned over to whisper in her ear, "You want a bed?" She furrowed her brow as I drew away. "Are you coming on to me, Marcus? Because I'm Arcania, and you're from the Miriamic Coven. It's never going to happen between us." I shrugged. We're both locked up for a reason. Neither of us are against breaking the rules. I turned toward the door, smirking. "What's that supposed to mean?" Kalina called after me. I didn't answer. I just stood in the doorway and shot one glance back at her. "Good night, Kalina." "Marcus, wait." She started, but I already shut the door. Her words were drowned out in the walls. Adrenaline pulsed through my veins as I stood in the hallway, waiting for my heartbeat to slow. Kalina was into me. She'd kissed me back. Something beyond my senses told me it wouldn't be our last kiss. There was something so entrancing about Kalina I couldn't put my finger on. Something that drew me in and refused to let go. It had to be something magical, though I didn't know what. After tonight, I was determined to figure it out.
This concludes the Midnight Breakout. Read more about Kalina and Marcus in the Prison for Supernatural Offenders series.
Author's note. Thank you for listening to The Supernatural Companions. All of the titles included are short stories connected to full-length novels featuring these beloved characters. Each Hidden Legends book can be found in audio. If you enjoyed The Hidden Forest and The Secret Passage, you'll find more of Imogen and Jonah in The Fire Prophecy, Hidden Legends Academy of Magical Creatures, Book 1. If you liked The Silver Crown, you can return to Odette and Theo by reading The Woven Mark, Hidden Legends University of Sorcery, Book 1. If you loved The Music Box, you can find Talia and Grant in The Coven's Secret, Hidden Legends College of Witchcraft, Book 1. And if you adored The Midnight Breakout, you can follow Kalina and Marcus in The Villain Institute, Prison for Supernatural Offenders, Book 1. You can find out more about the Hidden Legends universe by visiting www.hiddenlegendsbooks.com and discover even more free titles and exclusive content. Thanks again, and happy reading! This has been the Supernatural Companions Hidden Legends Short Story Collection Book 1, written by Megan Linski and Alicia Radis, narrated by Hannah Sharafian, Zachary Boersma, Amy Hall, A.J. Carter, Renee Kim, Caleb Summers, Maria Posey, and Jonathan M. Matthews. Copyright 2018 to 2021 by Megan Linski and Alicia Radis. Production copyright 2022 by Megan Linski and Alicia Radis.